Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours.
And there we are. Ladies and gentlemen, October 23rd, 2024. A little bit of a learning curve today, as you can tell. We're starting. I was hoping not to start out like that, but we're testing out our new equipment today. So welcome to the show today. We're going to get into a few different topics. Now, I want you to give me a heads up on how things sound. Let me know how the audio is, how the visual is. Not much has actually changed in that regard, but we're testing out the new Above Book laptop. And I'll give a quick little intro about why that's important and what this is in case you haven't heard of it. You know, privacy devices ultimately. But that on the note that I started there with today in general, there might be a little bit of a learning curve. I'm using two computers at the moment to make sure that I'm not going to miss anything. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do, and this is sort of something that I'm going to be discussing in a lot of different ways as we go, you know, like in general into the future, that we need to kind of bridge and brave these hardships, the uncomfortableness, the inconvenience of using something different or something you're not used to in the light of, or in the interest of your privacy, your personal freedom. I mean, these are really important things today, as we have things like the fake version of that coming from Prince and Blackwater Academy, and the Megaphone, which turned out to be some Chinese knockoff that wasn't really that secure. So ultimately, what I'm going to be doing today is testing this out. So just keep in mind there might be a little bit of a weird overlap there. Hope not. The beginning thing was only because I forgot to change the settings. So today we're going to be talking about updates on what's going on, Lebanon, Gaza, a couple of points you titled today regarding something I talked about with Steve recently that is just not something that's a big, you probably have already seen it, but it's important for me that you guys don't miss it. And that's in regard to a flagrant lie being told by Israel around Lebanon and gold that's already being exposed as a lie, even by corporate media, which ultimately shows you that that's all, I mean, their entire agendas are based around lies just to basically extend the genocide to Lebanon. But on top of that, we're going to be talking about an important discussion that a lot of people in the know have been saying long before October 7th, that, or in any other dynamic before that, the U.S. government is involved. They're on the ground. They're involved in decisions. I mean, even Axios had an article the first couple of months saying that a 3-star general was on the ground, and yet then you'd hear that we don't have anybody there, the contradictions there. So we're going to be talking about the CIA in particular, and a New York Times article that came out, I don't think was meant to really highlight this particular fact, but is exposing that the CIA was deployed set right in the beginning from October 7th forward, but also about these fusion cells, the dynamics that are being used, why they're being deployed and now being used in regard to northern Gaza, and exactly something that we've talked about before that hasn't really got much attention. And I was sourcing this to people that were on the ground, independent journalists, as well as Palestinians saying this. So it came with a grain of salt, saying we could be wrong, they could be deceived, but that they were, and this is now being proven correct, that they were forcing Palestinians to give up their biometric data, to scan their eyes, their face. And if they did so, along with giving up and basically stating on the record that they forego or they will give up their rights to return. The UNRWA overlap. You know, the thing that Israel says isn't real, doesn't matter, you're lying, you're racist, except we want you to, on record, on video, claim that you no longer have those rights that we're claiming you never actually had. The whole thing is built around not just lies, but a sinister nature of like complete disregard for human life in every possible way, around specifically whether you're a certain kind of person or not. We used to call that something in this country. And it's important to see that this is a bigger agenda. And this is why Vanessa Beeley and I talked about the idea that this is not just about Palestinians. This is about a global resistance against the budding technocracy, the building of the globalist idea. And all these Republicans that want to talk about globalism and ignore how Israel and the U.S. are a central guiding part of that are deceiving you, or can't see it, which kind of would blow my mind. But we're going to talk about how that's happening on the ground, the biometric overlap. We're going to go into a lot of different dynamics around this. Now, one thing before I get started, I wanted to say in general that, I mean, I'm sure the long-term followers of TLAV have noticed a gap in the content more so than over the last so many months, just in the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to I mean, I know you guys would tell me not to apologize or say, but in general, it's something that I think is important to say, that I apologize to those that are long-time dedicated followers of this platform that have gotten used to the kind of flow that we have on this platform, the up-to-date information, in addition to everything else we're dealing with, not to get into all of that, which is still a constant distraction. So many different things going on around the game. But ultimately, I'm still making sure I find time for this. In the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot more added to the plate, and a lot of good stuff, by the way. But just wanted to comment on that it's been very difficult to break off in some of these things. One of which is something exciting here. I'll start with that. This laptop that I'm using, which is the Above Book, is something that we're already, excited about, that we're talking about, that I'm really advocating people look into at the very least. I have the link below if you'd like to get one as is right now, that you can get a discount through I don't want to say it wrong. The discount code is down below, and you can get a discount for either the phone or the laptop. But what I'm excited about is that we were just talking earlier at a meeting this morning about the TLAV version of this, which I'm already going through. I'm trying to find different version, not versions, but applications, different dynamics, different things that I think would make this ideal for what I would choose for myself. And then once we get that set, we're going to basically have a TLAV version of the Above phone. I'm possibly with a logo on the back of the computer. I mean, these things are up in the air right now, but making sure we have enough RAM and memory to be able to have 500 tabs open and 17 things going at once, because that's what at least I feel I need to do the work that I like to do and the way I like to do it. And so if you're out there and you want to start doing this, if you want to get into this field, don't have to do it the way I do it, but if you would like to start with this, the point is to have something like this that you can choose to start with and, start running, as well as a direction I think we should all be leaning into, something that is de-Googled, that is privacy, focused on your privacy and liberty at the expense of everything else. And you can choose that balance. That's the point about this. You could buy these things and just dump all the platforms on there that are all spying on you if you want to, or you could choose to keep it as private and liberty focused as possible. So on that note, I just want to make sure you guys saw that. I mean, frankly, I'm kind of excited about this too, because it's taken me a long time to take this step, and it's just been about as I started with, the fact that it's inconvenient and that it takes time. And like, even right now, I'm like, okay, I'm missing something. All right. So let's get into this to start. In general, I'm going to go over a couple of, actually, I'll bring this up here so you guys can see the website we were discussing. And again, all the links are down below. And then this link itself will be included. And this link actually has the code embedded in it. So if you use this link, you'll already be supporting TLAV as well, which don't feel like you have to. Maybe you hate this platform and you just want to buy an Above phone. I'd rather you buy the phone and not give it to me, get it because it's important. So let's start with, there we go. Yeah, see, it's just the smallest things. It's little things like how, the buttons work, and it's interesting the differences on how. And that is one thing I wanted to say too, before we get further in, is that I think that what's interesting is the phone. We're also used to our phones. And the phone itself I had the hardest experience, that changeover, and I'm still working that in. But for me, this laptop is very similar to what I'm using now, and that's probably not going to be good for Windows users. It's very much more like a Mac in style. So it's been actually not that difficult to change over. It's much less than I expected. Okay, so talking about what we're going to get into today, I'm going to start with a couple of important points around the two-party paradigm. Obviously, we're getting closer and closer to the selection. Obviously, and by the way, as we get it closer to I'll actually grab that right now since I'm going to mention it, the Sedona event, which I hope you're going to be at least tuning into. Oh, it's actually Liberty on the Rocks. This will be from the 1st to the 3rd. So obviously we'll be there, at the lead up to the selection, which in a way is kind of on purpose because, we find that to be illegitimate, if not completely unnecessary or irrelevant even. So I won't be, in these days, I'll be focusing on that. We'll be doing a lot of work around that. Pretty much the second is when I'll be doing the all-day stream. If you want to support that on our side of it, where essentially you'll be able to watching my side of the background and the behind-the-scenes interviews, that'll be free on my website. The links are all included. But I'm hoping you'll also decide to join the event itself. Maybe even come join us, because that supports everybody. And it's also about, voluntarism, the idea of, peer-to-peer exchange without the government being involved. Yeah, what a world. So I also wanted to give you one quick note about what Scott Smith just pointed out. For those that have not seen the conversation around Georgia, I just did a great little quick breakdown interview, about 20, 30 minutes with Allison Morrow. And it really is, it's increasingly, it's continuing to seem like a very, very alarming and important conversation that's getting very little coverage. So I'll include some of the articles that we recently did, rather the shows. And as Scott said himself, at first, simply highlighting that this is at least 6 times greater than what he saw in East Palestine. Then also saying to me on the phone personally after he's reviewed this, that it seems to be at least possibly the greatest dioxin disaster in history, based on what he already has seen. The 12 to 20 million pounds of chlorine compounds versus about 2, I think he said, at East Palestine, if I remember correctly. Either way, a lot worse. So what he just recently put out, it says, just like the sunrise from Fort Worth, Texas this morning, we will be shining a light on the truth from East Palestine to the Biolab fire in Georgia. He says, I will be releasing my updated testing data from East Palestine, Ohio, with my scientific team today. So you keep an eye out for that at the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. And this appears to have significant relevance to the affected residents of Conyers, Georgia, too. So the point he's making, yet still with I haven't seen, you tell me in the chat, have you seen anybody else besides Scott, people like myself, and the few that are listening to this conversation from an independent media perspective, even mentioning the word dioxin, despite the fact that this is without question it's as if, like I've said this about past events, if you had tried to make the worst dioxin disaster possible, this is what you would have chosen: chlorine, plastic pallets, everything about it. It is a perfect storm for dioxin disaster. It even appears to be, and I don't want to jump the gun, more than what I've discussed from the Seveso, Italy disaster, which is from 1979, regarded for Time magazine as one of the top 10 worst environmental disasters in history. I mean, the people on the ground are getting bloody noses, headaches. They're still dealing with the same kind of stuff we saw from East Palestine. And remember, this is about the long-term issue. And the studies we go over in the show how they're talking about a massive reduction in fertility, immune suppression, cancers. It's alarming that nobody wants to talk about this stuff. And I think it's genuinely because they don't know what to do. And they don't want to take the brunt of the problem on their shoulders when they don't even have an answer for it. And if you don't think government would act like that, if you don't think at a conscious level that people, whether government or not, would make a decision to go, well, we don't even know what to do, so why tell them? If you don't think that that's something that makes sense with the way our government's been acting since its inception, then I don't think you've been paying attention. And he goes on to say, never forget you can't find what you don't look for. Meaning they're not looking for these things. And that's what he points out every single time. Now, on some two-party illusion points that I do think are important, I recently shared this as, all the kind of hubbub about the McDonald's thing, which really was stupid. And what's even more alarmingly stupid from the partisan side of this is it's objectively clear that it's a dumb thing to highlight. I mean, we all can acknowledge that fast food is bad for you, right? I mean, does anybody think otherwise? I don't think there's even a conversation about how this is a good thing. It's bad for you. But of course, it's fast and you can pretend it's cheaper, even though it's really not. It actually costs more when you break it down versus Whole Foods. It's all an illusion they play. But the idea is that this is bad for you, right? In every way, the worst possible conglomeration of things, seed oils and fake bread. I mean, everything, guys, from mRNA packed meat with all of their hormones and all of the stuff we've talked about, right? How does that in any way make sense? Why would you choose that with what you're pretending you're pushing when it comes to make America healthy again, right? Now, of course, you could just pretend like it's just one thing he chose to do. Maybe it's just a political move because people like McDonald's, whatever. Those are all possible, but it's obviously an objective thing to point out. And yet what's funny is you get the people on the right who are going, oh, these liberals freaking out about some of them, I guess, right? But I see far more people that are aware of all of it, or even Republicans that are going, well, that's stupid. You see, to always try to make it if anybody's against Trump, he's a deep state. Or if they don't like, he's a Democrat. Without even looking or caring if that's the fact. You are blind. You're choosing to lean in to whatever allows you to dismiss the thing that kind of should matter or really does. And this is one of those kind of things. It's a small point. But of course, it's obvious to point out that somebody's going, yeah, that's dumb. That doesn't align with what you're saying. And in fact, why would you want to promote something like this that is bad for everybody? Because it's mainstream. That's why. And it's business. It's everything we pretend these people are not, or rather some of them do. But that's the same thing. Tim Pool and the rest are all like, all the liberals are losing their mind. Well, anybody with a brain can see that this is the opposite of the direction that at least they're feigning. And this guy says, wouldn't it be nice if fast food was healthy too? And obviously, right? I mean, of course. That's the whole point, right? And the implication there, though, is that they all think that's what's about to happen, apparently, because Trump stands with the McDonald's thing and works behind the scenes. So therefore, McDonald's is going to be healthy soon. Well, yeah, I hope so. Well, why in the world would you assume that? And I said, all of his blind followers are blindly assuming that this means that. I sure hope it means that, but I prefer not to rest on the hope of billionaires and technocrats following through on their promises, let alone one they never even made. But that's just me. This person says, majority of billionaires and technocrats support Kamala Harris. Trump only has Elon Musk from that class, says Business Insider, which, by the way, doesn't even say that. And I said, oh, is that what the mainstream alternative media told you? Are you really this easy to manipulate? What about Adelson? What about Peter Thiel? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here's even an article, which, by the way, I'm not blindly trusting Forbes either. You can look into it for yourself and realize that it's right. It's pretty much right down the middle, which guess what? That's how it always is. Here are Trump's top billionaire donors. And you can go through this very long list of lots of billionaires that are very clearly behind him, including a lot of Zionist extremists. But the point is, if you only look at what the narrative is, if you only look at what the partisan circles are telling you that really don't care about the facts, they want you to believe their narrative because it benefits them. And, and maybe they believe in the party line. But at the end of the day, I honestly think people like this are just people that fall for this stuff. They believe in this person. They believe in the Tuckers that tell them you're supposed to think that. And if you look, it's not true. And then even then, a lot of times they reject the truth in front of them and go, well, that's probably a deep state trick or that. And maybe it is. But if all you ever do is assume into the direction of what you want to be the case, well, you might as well be in kindergarten. You're not looking at facts. You're going along with what the teacher told you. And that's not how this is supposed to be. So my problem is that all of them are the same thing. And that's what a lot of us are trying to highlight. And like Derek was pointing out today, my problem is that it doesn't seem that anyone's falling for Kamala Harris, but it seems like a lot of liberty-minded people are falling for Donald Trump. And so if we see it as the same thing, why would we be hyping something that no one seems to fall for? See, but the problem is they want to highlight it as only going after one side. And we see them all as the same thing. Now, of course, as always, we could be missing something, but it's about objective observation. My problem here is that these people are all like, actually, this is a good point to go to since I put it up here next. Oh, wait, is this the one? No, it's right here. Or maybe I didn't put it close. I would have been good to put right there. Well, there's a tweet that I'm going to go to in a second here that is from, we'll get to it in a second. I think I put it too far down. Oh, wait, maybe right here. There we go. In this together says, remember, folks, every vote you cast is a vote for BlackRock. So here's the problem is that people don't want to highlight the all-encompassing influence of BlackRock when it comes to things they like Rumble or McDonald's for that matter. As McDonald's, the top two shareholders are BlackRock and Vanguard. But we don't talk about that when Trump's in there banding about behind the scenes. But here's what Ian Davis points out from Larry Fink, a quote. I'm tired of hearing this is the biggest election of your lifetime. This is a quote from Larry Fink, BlackRock. He says, the reality is over time, it doesn't matter. We work with both administrations and are having conversations with both candidates. But you know what? The people that don't want to know that will ignore it and act like it's not real or never choose to look into it and pretend that he's lying. The truth is that that's the reality. The power structures don't care. They just hope you keep playing along. They just hope you choose one and keep pretending like you have an influence over it, because then you have given them consent, which is all it's really about. Now, also, the billionaires we've been discussing, like Miriam Adelson here, who demanded that he give them the authority to illegally take West Bank territory, which is illegal. Nobody says otherwise. But Trump goes, okay, here's $100 million. And he says, okay. It's very public. They wrote articles about it all over the place. And if you want to look more about how he's publicly said at least, 9 times here based on these videos, that he will censor for Israel, that he will remove people from this country if he sees them as a certain thing, which is not against which whatever your hated perspective might be, whether that's the case or not, it's your right to feel that way. And I have a right to call them disgusting. But the point is, when you're saying you're going to, let's say, remove the Jew haters from the country, when of course we can know as a fact that means Palestinian supporters being conflated with that conversation. Some of them may actually feel that way. You have a constitutionally protected right to say or think these things. That's free speech, guys. The whole thing this party's pretending they're fighting for. Or that, as he says in this most important one, Israel used to control Congress. And rightfully so. That's what he has said many times. You know what's funny about this? It's like, I've shown you this so many times, and yet every time I feel like we bring this up. Oh, you know what? I don't even have it here right now. It's on the wrong computer. Oh, there you go. First little bump in my head on the exchange. I was going to play that clip really quickly. I might even have it on the side here. The bottom line, and I shouldn't have to. My point in playing it again today would be simply to maybe catch the person who's here, who hasn't been here before, who wouldn't want to accept that until they heard it. But it's on the record, and he said it in many, many, many times. Doesn't look like I have it off to the side. The point is that every clip in this, every one of them, in one way or another, suggests that Israel should have the right to influence our policy. As if in one of them says, for example, that AOC and the rest wouldn't even be in politics today if Israel wasn't. Well, yes, that's exactly what we're saying. And he says that's how it should be. And this one simply says they used to control Congress, and rightfully so. I don't know why Americans who are on the Republican side of this cannot recognize how alarming that is. It's everything you've always been pointing out in other places, and yet you don't want to see it right here. Some of you, anyway. Now, on that same note, talking about the influence and this is what's so crazy to me is how we can all know and see. And I've already shown you this directly from True Social. This is a real tweet, or rather, whatever you call it, social tweet, truth, whatever you want to call it on that platform. Is that it's amazing to me that on March or April 26th, what is that? Yeah, April 26th, 2024, that he says this about RFK. RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant. A radical left liberal who's been in place in order to help crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, to get reelected. Okay, so either he thought that or he didn't. It's irrelevant. The point is he was saying it. Okay, so which means that's kind of what I read to Trump anyway. I think it's about what works for you, right? So that's being said because if this works that way, I want it to be seen like I knew that or that I called it out, or to get people to not support them anyway. But then all of a sudden things start to shift and you just ignore that you said that. Now, did you mean it or did you not? And if you didn't, then why'd you say it? Because it's all politics, guys. They lie. They'll say whatever you want to hear. Or he actually meant it and now he works with him. See, the point is you can't ignore how obviously incongruent that is if you just care. Of course, you could say that he meant it, and then suddenly someone showed him something and he changed his mind. That's what I always hope is the case, just like you. But I don't blindly assume that. And when you start to see so many of these line up, you start to ask, like with J.D. Vance calling Trump 1,000 different things until suddenly Peter Thiel gives him money. And now he's on your side. It's a game. And I know people can see that. I know you don't think you have other choices. You do. Stand by your principles. He simply goes on to say a vote for Junior would essentially be a wasted protest vote. That could swing either way, but would only swing against the Democrats if Republicans knew the true story about him. Oh, did that true story change when something else was told to you? Come on, guys. Junior is totally anti-gun, an extreme environmentalist who makes the green new scammers look conservative, a big-time taxer, an open border advocate, an anti-military vet. Okay, let's pretend like that just all changed, right? It's willful ignorance, guys. You know it, and I know you feel it, and you don't want to hear it if you're even here listening right now. But you got to be honest with yourselves about what we're talking about. And out here, and the obvious big example, and I'm going to be harping on this stuff, even though it's repetitive, so people see you before we get to the selection time. David Icke says, make America healthy again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Voting just encourages them. Mass, peaceful, non-cooperation terrifies them. Let me say that again. Mass, peaceful, non-cooperation terrifies them. That's why they want you to give all your collective power to an individual of their choosing, in the hope that they will do it for you. They won't. The idea is simply to buy time until the dystopia is complete. And I really believe that. I believe we're going to get to a point to where once you're in that position, it won't even matter anymore. And it's not abstract. They're literally talking about digital IDs and technocratic control structures, biometric control. Of course, then once you're in that position, does it matter if you can see that they're tricking you? No, because now we're in control. You can't say anything. It doesn't even matter what you think anymore. The mask is off, sit back down, or you're going to get boxed out of society. That's what we're walking into. Frankly, I think a lot of these Republicans know that and don't even care. It's you conservatives out there, the majority of that conversation, that care, that want something different, but just don't know where else to go. It's time to stand up. Find the courage.
Our nation has achieved a medical miracle. We have delivered a safe and effective vaccine in just 9 months. This is one of the greatest scientific accomplishments in history. It will save millions of lives and soon end the pandemic once and for all. I am thrilled to report that the FDA has authorized the Pfizer vaccine. We have given Pfizer and other companies a great deal of money, hoping this would be the outcome. and it was.
I know that you are pro-vaccine, obviously, did everything you could to get this vaccine out.
Let me know you guys can hear that. Can you make sure you can hear that? No one's commenting that you can't, but it's not playing on my end. I got to figure out why, but give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear this playing.
I know where you stand on the vaccine.
It was one of the greatest achievements. We did it in less than
100%.
9 months. The vaccine is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. And I came up with a vaccine, with 3 vaccines. All are very, very good. Came up with 3 of them in less than 9 months. It was supposed to take 5 to 12 years.
And yet more people have died under COVID this year, by the way, under Joe Biden, than under you. And more people took the vaccine this year. So people are questioning how.
Well, no, the vaccine worked, but some people aren't taking it. The ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take the vaccine.
I'm very proud of the vaccines. We got it done, as you know, Brian. We got it done very rapidly. In less than 9 months, it was supposed to take 5 to 12 years, and they wouldn't come up, most likely wouldn't have come up with the right answer. And we have 3 of them, great ones and great therapeutics. We got a lot of it done.
Would you recommend to our audience that they get the vaccine then?
I would recommend it, and I would recommend it to a lot of people that don't want to get it.
I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccines.
I got my booster shot as soon as they were available. And just the other day, former President Trump announced he had gotten his booster shot. Maybe one of the few things he and I agree on.
And look, I guess in a certain way, I'm the father of the vaccine.
All right. Well, that's the first thing I got to figure out. Why that's not playing on mine. I thought I had that squared away. But David Icke is always, seeing through it. I mean, again, one of the many things I don't know how we can ignore, how obvious that is, and still to this day, openly supporting it. Here's another example, and this is the kind of thing I keep seeing. Like I could not be more convinced that Elon Musk, whether he even knows it or not, is playing this Pied Piper role. And it could just be that whatever this is clearly advantageous for him, and so it doesn't even matter. But stuff like this is the problem. So this is a small point as well, but this Romulus Rothmus guy shared this, and it says, "Did you know in 2012 President Barack Obama repealed the Smith-Mundt Act," which, by the way, wasn't true, which had been in place in 1948. The law prevented the government from putting its propaganda on the TV ads. Now, it's a small mistake, I would argue. It was amended. It wasn't repealed. It matters. That's a fact, right? It was the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, right? They amended it and made it in and then the main point, as you've seen on this platform for a decade, which is that the Smith-Mundt Act was about stopping the government from propagandizing its people, which obviously didn't happen. They didn't care, even though the law was there, because your government is an illegitimate criminal organization. But as Ron Paul has pointed out so many times over the years, what they do is when let's just say we start going, well, you're not following the rules. Here's the thing, and you're not doing it. They go, okay, we hear you. Okay, so they passed the bill, and they go, okay, well, they don't say it like this, but we just made a bill that made that no longer illegal. Problem solved, right? Well, no, you just allowed yourself to do it. They don't say it like that, though. They just passed the bill, act like they'd addressed the problem. And now if you read the bill, oh, so now you're allowed to do it? There's so many times this happens. So the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act simply gave the caveat for national security. They can say, if they deem it national security interest, they can directly lie through the media and any other way to you. And ever since then, that was the point. So that newscast you just saw on Fox or CNN or MSNBC, it could have very well, and most likely was, entirely fabricated for national security purposes. And they don't even know that. And now they claim they have a legal allowance to do that. And they didn't care in the first place. That's really important to understand. So it wasn't repealed, it was amended. So first small point, but that's how this point how it started. And so the Twitter fact check or whatever we call it says, no, it was not repealed. The act was amended to allow the U.S.-sponsored foreign media to make requests. Okay, so that's 100% true. It's very easy to look up. And there's even articles there you can link it. Now, no, I'm not blindly doing that because the fact check said. It's because I already knew that, and the evidence is clear. And if you happen to look at those links, it would also show you that. Is that a deep state trick? Well, certainly could be. Or it's just the reality. So then Elon shares it and says, what reason was given for repealing this law? How in the world do you not know this already? Or he does know, and it's about trying to mislead people in very specific ways. You can decide for yourselves. But the point is that then it says, same thing. No, it wasn't repealed. It was amended in 2012. Okay. So Bad Kitty Unleashed says, okay, I see the community note. Here's my 2 cents. Now, there's really no air in this conversation. That's an absolute airtight fact. And it says it was for the State Department specifically, the ones who censor us for false reasons too. That just adding more context to the what it was. The point is simply that it was allowance for basically war for the most part, but really just national security interest of the government. And yes, the State Department in regard to being able to lie to you. And this adds an old one where Bad Kitty was simply making this point in 2023 saying, but it wasn't breaking news. So I just think that's important to point out. It says breaking. They lied to us. Propaganda really is allowed on U.S. soil. And what they're showing you here is it says, remember when the narrative was set that Smith-Mundt Modernization Act didn't allow propaganda? So where'd that come from? What set narrative are we talking about? You mean because the government denied the obvious provable reality that the text was stated? This is what I get frustrated about when it comes to partisan media. I don't even argue that from this person, it seems like a genuine effort to try to show what they think is the reality. But the problem is that if you're listening to information for people that are trying to mislead you or have a partisan swing to it, apparently somewhere that I didn't see that, it got set in 2023 that, oh, that's fake news. That's not the truth. Well, it was always the easily proven reality. But it says, we have an admission here for Matt Armstrong, former governor. Oh, so now that a person from the government says, guess what? That was real. Suddenly now it is. Or maybe they're lying. My point is that we should not be relying on some authority figure to guide you around what the truth is. Look into it for yourself. Read it for yourself. Research it. Find the bill and read it. Understand what they're debating about and fine-tune it for yourself. So the point is, in 2023, we didn't just discover this. We should have known this from 2012 forward, as people listening to TLAV did or any other platform that talked about it. So I think that's important. Then I want to show you this. This person says, the community notes on this are bunk. What happened to the community notes? They've been gamed. You see, and this is more of the point that I wanted to get to, the point. You're going to get a lot of this from people in the Republican, not conservative necessarily, but the Republican team sport politics side, because Elon said it. Therefore, if they're saying it's fake, it must not be the case. It's not bunk. It's if you took 30 seconds to just look into it for yourself, you'd realize that it was true. But because you've taken the stance, or partisan people have taken the stance that if it's challenged, therefore the deep state's after him. It's so easy to just play in this. You're living in an imaginary world where anything you've decided becomes fact. Anytime they challenge those decided imaginary ideas, that proves they're real, and everything goes in the way you want it to. Until you wake up in your technocratic prison and you didn't realize how you got there. But I just think it's an important overarching point, using a small point, to recognize that whether it's Twitter or whatever else we're talking about, that people like this, whether they know it or not, are guiding you to your own demise. You are goose-stepping to your own enslavement, and people just can't stop and look at it. And it's about much bigger things than this. We went over the Venezuela thing, the Haiti conversation. They are leading you down a very dark path. I think that's important to see. I'll close some of these real quick. So next, oops, oh shoot. One too many. A few too many. There it is. Okay, so next, I wanted to point this out, talking about J.D. Vance. Chief Nerd says, J.D. Vance says it's time to introduce the drug cartels to the United States military. Just on its face, before we get into the point that Josh Walkos obviously calls out, which is, I'm glad there are people that, I think I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he's leaning in the Trump direction, which I have my opinions, and you know how I feel, but I respect somebody who makes that decision and owns it. And that's what, it's not because I'm being forced in or lesser of evils. I'll talk to you all day long about why I think you're making a mistake. But if you stand by your choice and you actually believe in that choice, well, I respect that, even though I think you're making a mistake. My point is to simply say that I believe that's where he's leaning. I'm not sure. And that's to say that even though you have these major Republican leading narrative manager accounts that are making these statements, that he still has the integrity to say, well, you're wrong on this. And that's always what I'm saying about this, whether it's left or right. Make sure you have the integrity to stand up if you know that they're making a mistake, and don't believe or convince yourself that by hiding that mistake, it's somehow in the benefit of your party. It hurts your party, no matter whether you win or not. But he's saying about the drug cartels. Okay, so we're going to talk about the U.S. military going after an entity that exists in a foreign country. Well, yeah, let's just start this all over again. And we always told you that this was going to come that close to Mexico was always on the table. When Derek's written about this, there's a much bigger dynamic going on, not least of which is that the U.S. government is actively working with those cartels, and we don't want to talk about that. But he says, can you imagine if Mexico sent gunmen across the border and killed 70,000 Americans a year? Well, I'd love to think about what he's actually referring to when he gets to it. But before we talk about it, what do you think is the 70,000? What dynamic in reverse is happening like that? It's not, is the point. I'm sure somebody would jump to immigration but what he gets to is fentanyl. Where 90+% of it comes through the mail from China, but we're going to make this all about Mexico because you have an agenda. How it works. It says, because that's about what dies from fentanyl. What an abstract argument anyway. So now you're going to make it into fentanyl that comes through the mail or because drug cartels are selling it. And that translates to men coming across the border with guns. And these people are desperate to get you feeling like you're under attack. And guess who's actually attacking you? They are. It says, we would be in a major war. I think that we actually have have to have a military response at the southern border. Guys, it's so obvious how you're being gamed. Local law enforcement, they're telling us they're overwhelmed by some of these guys. And we've got to be willing to send our best people, our best fighters to get control of the southern border. What he's talking about is invading Mexico, guys. He's not just talking about the border. If you're pretending he means line up along the border, it's not what they're talking about. I think that's the most important issue confronting our country. And on top of that, that means militarizing the border, which is another thing that they really want to accomplish. But the point, as already said, Josh points out, little does he know the U.S. government is actively collaborating with the cartels. Now, do you think he doesn't know that? No, he's setting up a narrative for the government, not one side or the other, but just the government, because it's always about continuing the agendas. So he is a very clearly placed entity handed right down from billionaire Thiel himself to execute these agendas. And if you're standing there pretending like he doesn't know that, well, then why do you want him in charge? Now, of course, the point would be that, well, he doesn't want that. He's going to step in. That's not going to be the case. How in the world would you think that? Why would you assume any of those things? Because he sits on a podcast and says what you want to hear? Gee, what politician's never done that before? The bottom line is your government, all of it, has been working with these entities, just like the moderate rebels, just like Saudi Arabia, like every other entity we can show you that are, in fact, or Israel, the worst entities that were the very thing they pretend they're fighting. But it's all about getting you to think that they're fighting them so you continue to support their agendas, just like everything else we're talking about. Now it's going to come to Mexico, or hopefully not, but it seems like that's always been a name. And I'll include James Corbett's excellent breakdown of Peter Thiel, the strange story of Peter Thiel. It says, what do you call someone who identifies as a vegetarian, but who consistently chows down on veal, mutton, and ribeye steaks? Whatever you call that person, it's not a vegetarian. He says, and what do you call someone who identifies as a libertarian, but who has spent his entire career actively collaborating with governments, militaries, intelligence agencies in an effort to enrich himself and to grow the power of the state? Again, whatever you call him, it wouldn't be libertarian. Why then does every mainstream biography of Peter Thiel bend over backwards to stress his radical libertarian ideology? See, this is the thing. It's if you can't think two steps beyond this, that's why you're being played. Right? The idea is that, well, first of all, I think you have to take a step back, actually. If the argument now is that if they say it, therefore the opposite is true, which seems to be the kind of unspoken thing that seems to be happening more than ever today, wouldn't it be that he's not libertarian because the mainstream calls him libertarian? The reality is he's not. And the conversation of even the fake libertarian city in Honduras and the way this is technocracy, using the guise of what you believe in to rise. And it's the same thing we've talked about in every other context. It's why they use the wedge issues that they know you believe in to manipulate you into a certain position. He says, and baselessly insist that Thiel is part of a gang of Silicon Valley renegades who are seeking to overturn the state because they know you see these problems. They're using the state to think you're fighting the state. So guess what? You end up working with the state. It's the two-party illusion. It's everything else we've talked about. Now read this. It's great. And I think what's important to recognize is that these people are, and almost lazily, like with Musk and the MAGA idea, like it's like you could tell they don't even believe in what they're saying, but they just come out and say it. And again, it's not even about reaching the average people who also see that they don't seem like they're genuine. It's about having something to point to by the people who don't care if it's true, right? The leading, driving Republican talking heads and partisan people, they're the ones that they want to go, yes, perfect, that works, and point, we need to support them. And they drive the rest of you in there. That's where I'm trying to wedge in right now to make sure that you guys can not fall for it. Oh, and last point on the opening stuff and just partisan things. I made this point more than once already. And I think this is absolutely crazy that I don't want to read. I mean, I could assume all day hypothetical, what this would mean. And for the podcast, we're talking about this incessant text message bomb things we keep getting. And look, I don't know what I get like 10 of these a day. All about all sorts of different things, all from Republican stuff. Like going, hey, I'm Ted Cruz. Hey, I'm this, literally saying like that. Tweet like text messages that say, hey, this is Donald Trump's son. You should be voting for Trump. Click here for so-and-so. And I guarantee it's going to steal your identity or something like that. Or it's going to be something that's not honest. Why is it only Republican stuff? Why aren't I getting Democrat versions of that? I don't know. I don't know. You guys can read into it for yourself. This is sent to me by somebody else. It was simply saying $15 for a signed Elon Musk dark MAGA hat. It's Trump. Here are 3 top reasons to donate before FEC's. Isn't that just strange? And I also wonder why these phone companies are just simply going. I mean, I guess it's about anybody can buy a number and send text messages, but it seems very organized. I just wanted to point it out. I find it odd that you'd think you'd get it from everybody, right? If this was or maybe it's just a Republican agenda. Or how about this? Maybe it's a Democrat agenda to make you feel like Republicans are spamming you. All these things are possible, but I'm weirded out by this invasive way these things are working today. Just wanted to point that out. Found it interesting. So let's talk about a couple of things that are kind of straddling this, about the partisan conversation, social media, but then as we get into foreign policy and specifically Israel. Glenn Greenwald shared this on the 21st. A longtime senior Israeli government official and Netanyahu Likud advisor, Jordana Cutler, is now, guess what, the chief of Facebook's U.S. censorship unit and is on Israel, specifically in Palestine. We have to laugh at how stupid that is. My point to make is so it's not just Twitter. And if you're pretending still that somehow if you're somehow able to work yourself into a place where you're not able to see the obvious nature of the collusion with Israel on Twitter, the fact that Yaccarino and Musk have said they're partnered with the ADL, who is undeniably acting illegitimately to censor American voices. James Lee made a great documentary about how it's basically a spy agency. And it's so easy to see. Or using Authentics, which is an Israeli intelligence apparatus that is being used on Twitter to steal your biometric data. And we're going to get into biometric data being taken from people in Gaza. They're doing it right now to you on Twitter. Despite the fact that he told you that wasn't going to happen anymore. That's an alarming overlap of U.S. or Israeli intelligence being able to have access to Americans' biometric data. Why doesn't that worry these conservatives and Republicans? I don't know. But now it's Facebook too, which, by the way, it's always been all of them, I think. But now it's just right on the surface. Sam Bindel points this out. I've reviewed internal meta records that show the company's dedicated liaison to the Israeli government has repeatedly tried to censor Instagram posts belonging to pro-Palestinian student protest groups and other content related to war. Not violent, just having a Palestinian flag, protesting, saying, long live the Intifada, which means revolution, despite all the screaming. And yeah, you could say that in a very mean way. You could imply your revolution means killing all the Jews if you wanted to, but it doesn't mean that. It's like saying the American Intifada, discussing the revolution of our past. But what they love to do is just manipulate the way you view things for their own agenda, of course, which all really ultimately leads to the censorship of Americans, as well as the murder of Palestinians. But as Chris Mann pointed out, and this is her as well, saying Facebook's Jewish diaspora chief, which, by the way, why in the world would Facebook have a Jewish diaspora chief? Do they have a chief for every other abstract entity of the, population of the world that's spread around? No. It's interesting how this works. And it explains how she uses her position to censor, quote, hate speech that, quote, makes Jewish people feel unsafe. Now, let's be clear. Facebook is not even trying to pretend that they are caring about free speech. They openly censor hate speech and all that stuff. But so does Twitter, by the way. They just love to say it differently. They pretend they're not doing that. They pretend we're about free speech while openly censoring hate speech and anti-Semitism, and that's main focus. Which, by the way, you may agree with. I think people who express hatred towards people because of their religion or because of what their race is, I think they're disgusting, but they have a right to say it. That's protected. It's enshrined. It is inherent right in this country to be able to speak and think what you want. And they actively don't want that to be the case. Elon and Trump and the rest of them, as they tell you that they'll remove you from the country, as Elon said on his platform, that he would want them to be deported if they shared a certain flag. Now, you can all argue that they were just saying they don't mean them. Well, sure, maybe that's the case. But they did say them. And that's important that we highlight, because you want to pretend they're fighting for free speech. Well, that's not free speech. Now, again, as he points out, that either way you go on this, you're voting for BlackRock or for Zionism or any number of overlaps, which should start to make you wonder whether there's more of the same than there is different. And I'm not talking about what they say out loud. They say a lot of things that make them look different, but what they do is what matters. Now, I'll include some articles. This one's from the COVID-19 era. The COVID coup, the BlackRock takeover of American interest. That's from June 18, 2020. That was under Trump's administration, right? And this was about the idea of, and to be clear, when this took place was at the end and during Trump's administration. This is the plan that BlackRock essentially took over the U.S. Treasury. I mean, and it's wild. And the plan was written before COVID-19, yet they used COVID-19 to rationalize why they did it, like a lot of other things. But we're all chalked that up to he was confused, he was misled, whatever. Certainly wasn't. I'll also include the great article written by Josh Walkos or Champagne Joshy on Twitter, The Long Shadow of BlackRock. Now, I want to talk about something to start before we get further into the foreign policy conversation that was really interesting. Oh, you know what? Now I don't remember who shared this with me. I forgot to pull it aside. I usually love to give, and if they want it, I like to make sure they point out the people that share these things with me. Maybe I'll have it on the tweet here. But somebody reached out to me and said, hey, check this out. This whole 911 center thing in Connecticut is interesting. And I said, interesting, because we've talked about this before. Now, here's an article that Whitney wrote, and she's covered this a lot on her and my platform, our platform, but her on Unlimited Hangout and the stuff we do on Last American Vagabond. The Prince and the Spy, 2023. Now, this is about specifically the Eric Prince and the spy, and it's an Israeli spy, no, without question, and how this company essentially uses Americans as a token to be able to have internal access to intelligence and military and selling these things with, and on top of that, we just talked about the pager aspect or the infiltration of Israeli tech. It's everywhere in this country. And I think it's so obviously a problem, and I think our government is so obviously aware and don't care because of other influence over them. It's crazy. The Unit 8200 overlap, the intelligence infiltration of tech companies, startups all over the world, but all over the United States. Now, that's not meant to be some attack on Jewish people. It's an attack on a foreign government that is actively using this to manipulate our policy, our outcomes for their benefit. It could be any religion you want it to be. It's about the reality this is happening. And what the bigger point about this is about one of the things they discuss is Carbine 911, now just Carbine, which is one of those discussions, many of them, but just one of them, where the Israeli government and through these apparatus or apparati have taken control of 911 call centers all over this country. Now, of course, you could argue that there's nothing nefarious going on there. Maybe you're right. But it's weird to me that a foreign government, or rather, and this is the main important point, Israeli intelligence-connected companies with former and current intelligence assets working in these companies. Now, right there, the point is, well, maybe they don't work. Maybe they just started a company. They're not part of it. They have openly said over the years, and in this article, they break this down from an Israeli outlet that says that what they're doing is acting in the interest of the Israeli government in this access, in what they do with these startups. That was the whole point of what they were doing. That was an agenda. It was laid out. So when they do these, they say, we're doing this for the interest of the Israeli government, no matter where it is in the world. So it becomes interesting. Then we start having these weird leaks and hacks and different things that are happening that always tie back to an Israeli company. And then could you go, well, Iran hacked us. Okay, well, at the very least, you should say, well, maybe you're not the best secure asset to have here, but maybe we should be asking whether Iran was even involved. Maybe there's something different happening here. Here is from October 22nd. Some service restored after issues with 911 call centers. No, it's not some big epiphany. It's just interesting to highlight the fact that now we're having issues with these call centers. And it's important to highlight that, yes, in Connecticut, this is one of these locations. Carbine was installed in 2020 in Connecticut. So just all the point I'm making, whether the down of the 911 call centers, which, by the way, I've never heard of, is only because of this or not. My point is to highlight that this is an alarming overlap to where these companies, while they're committing genocide in the world in multiple locations, that they have internal access to these conversations. And as the article covers, that it does have ability to access your phone, your data through this entity, like everything else. But your government just doesn't seem to care. Now, here's the actual website if you want to check it out for yourself. It's now just Carbine, and you can see the little icon there. But as well as your media, which shouldn't be surprising. Alan McLeod did a great article and a thread he wrote with it here. Israeli spies are writing American news. His new investigation uncovers a network of ex-agents of Israeli spying agency, guess what? Unit 8200, working at some of the U.S.'s most prestigious outlets, including Axios, CNN. Big surprise. Now, it's very clear, guys. There's no way around this. I mean, this guy specifically, Barack Ravid, has been called out many, many different times. And it's very obvious the overlap. But these people are now being explicitly caught for working surreptitiously in some cases for a foreign government and writing an American. I mean, this should matter. If this was China or Russia or anybody else that they would want you to be worried about, it would be a huge story. But not today. And that's maybe why we get ridiculous articles like this. This is from the New Yorker from the 14th of this month. Rationalizing the horrors of Israel's war in Gaza, which I pointed this out many times already, which is absolutely abhorrent. That's even the title, but this is the worst part. The novelist Howard Jacobson has argued that too much press coverage of dead Palestinian children is a new form of blood libel against Jews. That's actually what it says. So we're not worried about killing children. We're worried that you're pointing at it too much and that that's somehow an attack on Jewish people. No, it's an attack on child murderers. And how about we shouldn't care if you're over discussing child murder, right? How about we care that children are being murdered in the first place? But no, let's make it about the victim of the person killing the child. You're making them out. I mean, it's just so disgusting. The only person talking about Jewish people here is the Jewish person trying to pretend like that's what we're talking about for the interest of Zionism. This is about anybody on the Israeli side, whatever their religion, murdering children and nobody doing anything about it. To the point to where they think it's okay to make the argument that you pointing it out is an attack on Jewish people. You know what that is? That is the most desperate thing I have ever seen in my life. The most flailingly desperate, like the last ditch effort to make you go, just stop looking at all the children we're killing because it makes you racist. Unbelievable. The New Yorker, this is on shelves at supermarkets. This is going to be in front of people. And I don't know how you think in the world this can go without notice. Now, as Sal Diagras points out, somebody's put, it looks like it's taxpayersforpeace.org, put up this billboard. It says, Israel kills 3 school buses of kids daily. All right, so what should we care more about? That Israel's killing casually 3 buses full of kids every day, or that they feel like that's insulting to them that we pointed out? Do I even need to answer that question? It's unbelievable to me. Glenn Greenwald also points out something many of us have highlighted post October 7th, but long before that. The potency of propaganda is amazing, he says. I bet most Americans don't know that Israel was bombing Gaza throughout 2023, before October 7th. Just like most Americans believe the lie that Hamas beheaded Israeli babies on that date and killed 1,200 civilians, both of which are not true. And here's the article. Israeli strikes on Gaza kills top militants and 10 civilians. Oh, look at that. It's May 9th, 2023. This is just somebody else who's saying this. This is what but Glenn is pointing out. He says, completely misleading. Israel bombs when they are attacked by the enemy. 2023 was retaliation. Please be honest. And he is. You're probably an IDF bot for all we know, just out there lying. But either way, the evidence is obvious. And here's one of the many articles. Now, this is actually citing UNICEF. It was literally written on October 6th, the day before. UNICEF said 2023 is, quote, the deadliest year for Palestinian children before October 7th. See, these are the things that should matter to anybody honest. Now, one interesting point that I'll include, I think this is just hilariously sad, that this, Anti-War is writing this. Please follow antiwar.com. They're doing, in fact, great work. Israel's use of human shields in Gaza sparks calls for U.S. probe, which, by the way, is going to go nowhere. Of course, specifically because they don't care what the CAIR National points out. This is the Muslim American Advocacy Group. The point is that everybody should know by now how obvious it is that Israel's using human shields. It's an open secret is the point. And here actually is the video this time. I've included the article in the past. There's one of the examples right there. The open secret of Israel's use of human shields. This is just the clip focused on only that part. Now, what's highlighted here is the simple fact that this group is saying, look, we know this is happening. We urge the State Department to investigate. Do you think they will? No, they're going to go, Israel's going to look into it, and we're going to get back to you. We're going to follow up. They're murderous, guys. That is it. When they hear that statement, that means I support genocide, is what it means. They're not dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. The sad reality is that it's always been this obvious. They just don't care. They're willing to look this right in the face and not care. 2013, Palestinian children tortured, used as shields by Israel, per the United Nations. Reuters. Israeli soldiers who used Palestinian boy, a 9-year-old, as human shields avoid jail. That goes on. Example after example after example after example, as well as the fact that Haaretz recently wrote the article talking about them using human shields post-October 7th, but your government doesn't care because they only care about what Israel tells them to do. But here, just point is that even U.S. groups are now screaming about enforcing the law that they won't care about. Now, to get into the kind of we're going to go over some more in-depth about North Gaza, for example. But this is just October 22nd. This is yesterday, I believe. Yes. And just showing you this is just one example. This is about a 48-hour period, but the point is that simply this is constant, incessant. It never stops. And now it's happening in Lebanon too. Israeli military kills 115 Palestinians in Gaza over a 48-hour period. And that should be shocking. But it seems like we're just supposed to act like this is what's supposed to be happening, man. People pretend maybe they're just melted. It is sad. It's sad. But I'm hoping more people are beginning to recognize what this really is. And I know that is happening. I guess more so that I hope we reach the people that have yet to see it, because it's constant. Never will this be, no matter what the propaganda machine does with this will never go away. The world has seen this. This will be always on this conversation. Hopefully it causes some consequences. Now, even in Lebanon, Israeli strikes in the same day, 63 people in Lebanon on Monday. And we're talking about civilians. We're talking about civilian locations over and over and over. And now they're not even caring to try to prove these things. And yet this is what we're getting. The Cradle did a great article on this from the 21st. Quote, everyone not dead or injured is mentally damaged. Israeli army hit by silent crisis, which, by the way, should be insulting. I kind of don't feel bad for people murdering children, but I guess the reality is not every one of them are necessarily the same. That's just being objective. But my point is that obviously you're struggling. Unless you're a sociopath or psychopath, you're going to go home feeling mentally damaged. Even if you just stood by and watched them rape and kill in front of you. Yeah, big surprise. This is what these things do to the human psyche. This is what happened. This is why military people from the illegal wars of the U.S. government come home and are completely torn, because they did things that you're not supposed to do or see. And I guess, yes, there's some of them that just don't care. And we're seeing those. Those are the ones Israel keeps using because they're really good at doing all the bad things, moving them over to Lebanon. But the reality is most people aren't. No matter how propagandized you are, whether you truly think Palestinian children shouldn't exist, once you do it, that's something the brain has a hard time with. So it's kind of crazy that the focus, now the Cradle's writing it, covering it the way I think it should be covered, highlighting how outrageous that is. But as Jason Hinkle points out from the CNN article, which says he got out of Gaza, but Gaza did not get out of him. Israeli soldiers returning from the war struggle with trauma and suicide. Yeah, you're going to have a hard time making me feel bad about that. On top of the fact that we're not going to see CNN do many articles about the struggle on the other side. Just some you'll see because of opportunism, I argue. But as Jason points out, this is what the article says. The former soldier has spoken publicly about the psychological trauma endured by the Israeli troops in Gaza. In a testimony to the Knesset, Israeli's parliament, in June, Zakin said that on many occasions, soldiers had to run over terrorists, dead and alive in the hundreds. Can you believe that? CNN published a piece today about Israeli soldiers returning from Gaza. One bulldozer driver testifies that they drove over Palestinians, dead and alive, in the thousands. Yeah, I guess we know they put them all through a trial to find out that they were terrorists before they ran them over, because it's the only democracy in the Middle East, right? If you're running over thousands of people, those are civilians, guys, without question. No matter whether you think half of them are Hamas or not, the point is you're not stopping to find out. And we've already seen the reality of what they've been doing to people, arresting them en masse and calling them all terrorists. He says this is genocidal and just breathtakingly evil. And he says, P.S., how this gets framed around psychological trauma of Israeli soldiers and not the victim of genocidal violence is wild. It just shows you their true intent here, guys. That's CNN for you. how unreal that is. And the fact that you're letting them frame this as he's troubled by the fact that he had to murder all of these terrorists. He had to run over. Did you? You had to run thousands of people over? I mean, so the only way you can really take that is that they were ordered to do so, which is probably the case. It's just, this is the, even just the idea of this is something that's hard for me to get on my mind. It should be for everybody. That it's even possible that the media, the government, that any human being, that a military would be willing, capable to order this, to do this, to support this, and then to manufacture an obfuscation around it is hard for me to digest. Now, one of the obvious points here is that your government is absolutely, without question, completely 100% involved, immersed, and driving this bus. That we can't pretend this is any other, the evidence is overwhelming. And there's already been countless examples of how they're on the ground, how they're working. And just like the game they played with Yemen where we were giving assistance to the way, but we weren't actually dictating. Yes, you were. You were proven and taken. There are photos of you on the ground outside of these torture prisons that you let the UAE run that nobody ever got in trouble for, right? Same situation everywhere. They are the bad guys in this conversation, guys. And the point is the CIA was deployed to the ground. You know how long they've been lying about that? And this is from the New York Times on top of what Dan Cohen's excellent work is showing. Israel and the U.S. are set to deploy 1,000 more mercenaries to round Palestinians in northern Gaza into walled-off concentration camps, where they'll receive humanitarian aid only if they submit their biometric data. And this goes into the story we were telling you from before. Now, I'm talking maybe 2-3 months into this. There was a story that came out from people on the ground, and one brave person that was covering this, one of the journalists, where they were telling you that these people in the north who were remained there after they told them to go were being forced to not only on video speak out the word that they forego, give up their rights to return, and literally hand over physical keys if they have them. And we're talking keys to the homes that Israel claims that aren't theirs. That's how obvious it is that Israel knows that they're covering this up. They know they're lying to the world about the reality because that's what they do. They're patent liars. They lie about everything. And before you think that's some kind of a racist comment, it's not. It's about Israelis and their government, not about anything other than that, as well as the fact that everyone seems to know this.
Let me preface these remarks with I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars.
Point is that they will mislead about anything. And what we're talking about here is the forced, I mean, we all like, it's weird. What's interesting is that in a normal context, like right now, we would argue that it's a violation to take your biometric data without, but we're talking about a war situation, right? So people almost dismiss this as some kind of small thing. It's not. I keep saying this, where we're going in the world, we don't even really grasp what these things will mean. And on top of that, you're talking about a structure where people in the people they're taking this from are being genocided. What is this going to be used for? Now, and that's the side point. It's important, though, that they're taking their biometric data, but they're forcing them to give up their rights in order to not be killed, because that's really what this is. And the CIA has been there since October 7th, probably a lot longer than that. But he covers this. And the company behind this plan literally calls itself the Uber of war zones. You know, but how to make it so benign, so average. Oh, we're just the Uber war zones. Why is that a normal thing? Why is that something anybody would like? That should make you feel disgusting. That we're just a normal group. The fact that we have so many war zones and they're so common and so ongoing that you have a group that literally calls itself the Uber of war zones. That's the problem. Your governments have manufactured that ongoing reality. And guess what? They pretend they're fighting for freedom. Are we really still pretending that's the case? Well, sure as hell Republicans and Democrats are. We all know better. Show me one war where there was a positive outcome. Anything, guys, anything in the context of what the U.S. government has done in living memory. They have been removing people. They have been ending they have done every single thing that they continue to pretend they're fighting against. And in fact, are the most obvious embodiment of those things in the world since they've been doing this. So here is what the Middle East Eye points out. Israel considering U.S. firm for biometric screening. Now, what I'm going to get to is a New York Times article that makes the point that they've been here from the beginning. So all this is a new step in this. So the people, the CIA group, we're talking about confusing them for the biometric data process here, which again, then there's this Uber for war zones. Considering a plan to deploy private U.S. logistics and security companies to create a gated community in Gaza where Palestinians would be subjected to biometric screenings to receive aid. To receive the aid, by the way, that they are withholding from them right now. Which, by the way, is not something that even the idea of withholding this in any context should be the immediate stop of any funding from the United States. And they've now, they've now said they don't care. They've gone from it's not happening to we know it is, but we don't care. We're going to keep arming them. Because that's what it looks like to act with impunity. Here's the New York Times. U.S. fusion cells, which are something we've talked about before. It really just means these overlapping intelligence sharing between different, what's the word I'm looking for? Different authority figures and different, police and FBI and whatever else, CIA. And the point is that they are now, this article is from the 19th of October. And it says, U.S. fusion cells assist in Israel's hunt for Hamas leaders. So over here, we're talking about a CIA group or the overlap, right? But this is what we're talking about from the bigger conversation. As we can see, the CIA is what we're discussing. And if you look at this quickly, oops. Oh, that's weird. See, new computer. Where are we? Where's the find? There we go. Cells. So it says right here, for more than a year, much of the attention and criticism around American support for Israel has been focused on U.S.-made bombs and weaponry. But in the intelligence assistance to Israel has also been crucial. U.S. intelligence helped locate the 4 hostages who were rescued by Israeli commandos in June. So what we have to read here between the lines that they would never say is that means, and I'll get to the next part where it shows they were deployed right after October 7th, is that means they were at least alongside, maybe not literally standing next to them, but in authority figures, but possibly standing next to them when they killed hostages, when they assassinated people they weren't, their own people, or when they murdered their own hostages when they were holding a sign that said SOS, or every number of them afterward. So think about that, as well as the possibility they might have been there before October 7th. And what does that mean about what happened that day? But it says, and from nearly the beginning of the war, the U.S. military and intelligence cells were focused not just on looking for hostages, but hunting for top Hamas leaders. Now, they just want to take some credit for the murder of Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. The idea being simply that they want to be like, we were involved in that, but which openly means that they're also involved with all of the atrocities, which we already know by now. America's top brass is not claiming credit for the Israeli operation that killed Sinwar, an architect of October 7th, but they note their intelligence aided the hunt. You see my point? They're just kind of like, we did it too. It says, over the course of the war in Gaza, according to senior officials, the U.S. fusion cells have shifted their emphasis based on the most current actionable intelligence. Sometimes the best tips were the locations of hostages. Okay, so if this is the case, you're telling me that they have been killing far, far, far more people than they have been taking home. And we all know they ordered the Hannibal Directive and they seem to be killing their hostages. So you think they don't know this? This has been written by the Israeli media. So this is a pretty simple effort to make it sound like that. So there's no other way to take this. This means they've been involved with whatever choices they've been making. And I think that's pretty clearly adding up to the killing of their own people. This is other times the cells focused on the whereabouts of the Hamas leaders, and neither mission was ever set aside. U.S. officials said that White House officials regularly meet with the CIA about what more support the targeting cells might need to support the hunt for Sinwar. Officials have not revealed many details about the kind of intelligence the cells have provided Israel. So remember, fusion cells. So now, because you realize if you look this up, it's a concept of internal. We're talking about the sharing of information amongst different agencies, the world's looking before, in the U.S. So now there's this weird overlap to fusion cells with Israeli agencies? Well, if you haven't seen it by now, here's the most obvious reality of the incestuous overlap of whatever we're calling that. The government, the intelligence, they're embedded. That's why your government can't seem to get this tick off its back, or whatever way you want to look at it, guys. They ignore it. They're a part of it. So the reality being, we have now an internal influence and overlap with our intelligence with the Israeli government. That's why these intelligence apparatus, these individuals, these startup companies are all scattered across this country imagine if that was China or Russia. They would lose their minds, and rightly so, because any government doing that should be a problem. But again, now we're starting to see why it's not. Maybe we're in the world where the people talk about the CIA and these being like the real runners of the country, the deep state. Well, if we now recognize that they're all kind of, this is why Whitney Webb calls it the binational security state. It's what we're looking at. So that's a bigger point to take home. But on top of the fact that the CIA has been resting on October 7th forward and it being a part of all the atrocities we commit, there is no decoupling the U.S. government from what's been going on. There's just not. Now, Dr. Renee Lamont points out the U.S. fusion cells assist in Israel's hunt for Hamas leaders, but she says that I love this excerpt from says the Defense Department officials have insisted that they are not directly supporting the military operations. A campaign that has led to deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians under the rubble. So this is interesting in light of a report by a reporter in Jabalia camp that 2 brigades of American commandos are working with Israeli commandos in actually going to house searching, conducting raids, following the 2 Americans and 2 intelligence brigades that are detonators of explosives. See, the point is, it is a dual operation, guys. That's my point. And we can prove this in so many ways. And it's things like this New York Times article that forced the idiotic Matt Millers of the world to have to at least give some indication. The reality, though, is that we know and we've been showing you this from the beginning. The 3-star general, the Axios pointed out, the CIA, the groups on the ground, they're complicit. But you don't need to be convinced of that. It's just more evidence. And since I suspect that they would claim they have nothing to do with bringing the houses to rubble if they go in search and raid and such, I also cannot imagine that they are using these drones, not using the weapons part of the drones in these operations. Clearly, the United States is completely in on this war, and this article brings us a step closer. I agree, especially when combined with the reporting out in Jabalia to understand how involved the U.S. is. And this is what I was reading shortly after October 7th. She says, I directed special operations, quote from the article, personnel and our intelligence professionals to work side by side with their Israeli counterparts to help locate and track Sinwar. But yet you pretend like you weren't involved. I mean, you're literally on the ground in 17 different ways, acting alongside them. And you just can't, guess what? They're lying. Surprise, surprise. And you get the point. It's just really more highlighting the same ideas. I think that's really important. Here's somebody on the ground. Just to add more credence to this. He's a journalist from specifically Jabalia. And he says, this is on the 19th, a special American military unit with multiple missions is participating with the Israeli army forces on the ground in Jabalia refugee camp. I mean, you realize, you know what this means more than anything? That means they know there aren't tunnels here, that there aren't hostages or human shields. They've been bombing the Jabalia camp. I mean, if I remember correctly, that's the camp they bombed that they claim they killed 400 people to stop one commander who turned out not to be there. And even Wolf Blitzer couldn't swallow that. And they just keep going back. They know what they're doing. U.S. military personnel right alongside them in a refugee camp. And it says for a week now, there have been searches, raids, inspections in Western Jabalia by joint American-U.S. engineering units, tirelessly and without boredom, accompanied by intensive bombing operations. To what end? Annihilation, guys. Displacement, annihilation, ethnic cleansing. He says the New York Times revealed the Pentagon secretly sent commando forces to Israel to advise them, which I just showed you. Sam Husseini points out, now this is important to think about. Now, obviously, the reality is that it's not, they've been there, okay? That should be obvious. But now that we know, at least reported by the media, which they'll be forced to acknowledge that they have deployed, okay? Well, did we forget how that's supposed to work? That's supposed to be congressional approval. But, I mean, we should all laugh out loud about how dumb that is, since that hasn't happened, even the Iraq wartime frame, there was overlaps on that, but that just doesn't happen. Why? Because they know that they're taking step by step away, or rather, the liberty, if you will, to show you or to demonstrate that they are no longer bound, if ever, by the things that we pretend they are. So it's amazing we have yet to really engage with the reality that your government doesn't care about these things. When's the last time congressional approval is given for any deployment, anywhere? There's always a loophole because they just don't care about these. They care about using them to enforce on you, to keep you in line. Just foreign policy says Congress never authorized sending U.S. troops to imminent hostilities in Congress, which, by the way, this is not a correct video. U.S. Civil Defense News shared a fake video, even though they are deploying troops, just makes sure that's clear. But they say this is a violation of the Constitution and War Powers Act of 73, which is true, regardless of the fake video. So remember that when it comes to that platform, that account. But he makes a good point. Sam Husseini says, why aren't Massey and Tlaib filing articles of impeachment? It's a pretty damn good question, right? Biden and Kamala, well, they should be held accountable for this, but just so too should Trump, and so too should Obama before that, where they all did the same things. They deployed without congressional approval. But the point is the same. They're all violating what we believe is supposed to bind them. And not even Massey and the rest are saying anything about that. I find that concerning. I mean, or they say stuff, but it's like with Jordan and the rest standing up and calling out Israel, but not caring, as Sam pointed out as well, to put sanctions on them for what they're doing. Now, here is Biden saying back in 2007 that he would impeach Bush for doing the same thing.
The President of the United States had launched an attack on Iran without congressional approval. That would have been an impeachable offense. Do you want to review that comment you made? Well, how do you stand on that now?
Yes,
do you think
I do. I want to stand by that comment I made. The reason I made the comment was as a warning. The reason I don't say those things lightly, Chris. You've known me for a long time. I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee for 17 years, or its ranking member. The president has no constitutional authority to take this nation to war against a country of 70 million people unless we're attacked or unless there is proof that we are about to be attacked. And if he does, I would move to impeach him. The House obviously has to do that, but I would lead an effort to impeach him.
I don't use words lightly. Some of you may have seen me on Stephanopoulos or Meet the Press and the shows I've been on a weekly basis. I want to make it clear to you. I've drafted, with the help for 17 years, I was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee or the ranking member. And ladies and gentlemen, I drafted an outline of what I think the constitutional limitations have on the president under the war clause. I went to 5 leading scholars, constitutional scholars, and they drafted a treatise for me. It's being distributed to every senator. And I want to make it clear, and I made it clear to the president, that if he takes this nation to war in Iran without congressional approval, I will make it my business to impeach him. Yes! That's a fact. That is a fact.
Always the same. All hypocrites, guys. They're all hypocrites. The president has no constitutional authority, and now he's president, doesn't care, right? Because it's always about using what you believe is going on to go after their political opponents, when they all know internally that none of this applies. But they don't want to expose that to you. There's the golden rule. The top rule is that they can't let you know that's the reality, because they use all of that to keep you in control. But they'll bandy back and forth about the lies they use to get power over each other. Because they're all, it's a big club and you ain't in it, guys. That's what we're dealing with. So this is an interesting point overlap. I mean, we've talked about Brian Mast and his wearing his IDF uniform, the alarmingly obvious issue with that. And the idea that this person is so blindly, as an American politician, if you want to call him that, working for a foreign government. I mean, attacking Americans when they're acting within their free speech rights because you don't like what they're saying or doing. The point is, 2 congressmen from the dominant Israel first wing of the Republican Party have introduced a bill that would give U.S. citizens who are foreign fighters in Israel's apartheid army committing genocide, by the way, the same benefits as U.S. National Guardsmen or reservists. That's Brian Mast for you right there. They're saying pay Americans for a U.S. person. And again, that simply, all that could mean is an Israeli-born IDF member who also happens to have U.S. citizenship, pay for what they're doing in Gaza, right? Or rather, give them benefits from American tax dollars for what they're doing in Israel, whether or not they've ever even lived in this country. That's Brian Mast for you. That's what it looks like to work for a foreign government while they're committing genocide at the expense of Americans. There's no racist point in there, guys, as much as they would love to make it about anti-Semitism. This is an American politician who is rationalizing giving benefits to a person fighting to commit genocide. I don't care if they're American or anything else. They are committing genocide. There's no question. That's Brian Mast. Make sure you remember that. Now, here's a really weird overlapping story that I also did find offensive. Now, there's 2 things to look at it from. One, from a religious perspective, which I have that perspective too. But for the sake of this conversation, coming from a journalistic perspective, we're going to discuss this as a contradiction right? The reality of how obvious it is that there's the larger deception being presented to Americans from how the Zionists view you. Now, it says a family of Christian soldiers who fell in Gaza asked to remove cross from his headstone. So these are a Christian family, and this guy who fought for the IDF as a Christian. It says the defense ministry is attempting to reach an agreement with the family of Sergeant David Bodomsky, who fell in battle in Gaza. It says, this is what it says, quote, by law, it's not permissible to place a cross or any other religious marker, that's not true, on a military headstone. Or rather, if it is true, nobody else cares except if it's a cross. Now it says this is especially important in the Haifa military cemetery, where fallen Jewish soldiers are also buried. That's how the Ministry of Defense wants you to hear that. So this is my point about how willfully dishonest they are. This is my point. They're saying that where they're also buried, but it's very easy. And even this article points out that that's not the way it's viewed. It's viewed as a Jewish cemetery. And there's plenty of other Jewish symbols all over this, which I have no problem with. What I have a problem with is people, rather not even a problem. What I want you to recognize is that these are people that are acting like this Christian should not belong there, even though he died and fought for Israel. So what that needs to show you is not necessarily about Jews in particular, but this is the case. We're talking about the Jews in this conversation, but we're talking about Zionist Jews. Or simply Zionist Jews that have been influenced by Zionism. That's my perspective on this. But what I want you to recognize is that because the reason I say that is because I know in this conversation that there are people, as I've highlighted before, in Israel that would fight for that person's right to have that there. Maybe I guarantee it's a minority, but it's important to see that that's not just how Jewish people are. It's about Zionism and the influence over it, which makes it that Christianity is a problem. And here, even though this person died and fought for Israel, they don't want him to display that. But then they even go as far, and the government I'm talking about, is to frame it as, well, no, it's just that nobody's allowed to do that because they know that you would be offended by that. So they lie to you. That needs to hang over everything happening here in every conversation. Now it says the ministry said is working with public committee for a soldier memorial to reach an agreement. And it says the defense ministry mourns with the family, and I will continue to accompany the family. We're on their side, sort of thing. But it says the family said, because it's easy to prove, that there are other graves in the cemetery that have religious markers on them. Okay, so why are we being lied to? Is their point. Now it says a Christian resident of Haifa made. Oh no, they're talking about the same person that passed away. It says earlier this month, his mother visited the grave and found that his headstone had been covered in black cloth while a cemetery was taking place for those killed, or rather a ceremony, taking place for those killed on October 7th. It says, I don't care. I don't have words to describe the humiliation she felt. How sad is that? Oh, you know what? I don't think I grabbed oh, that's too bad. I had a tweet, I think it was from Censored Man, that showed the thing being covered, but you can imagine it. It just had a veil over the top of the thing. But this says, I thought my David, who gave his life to the country, oh, you're kidding me. I knew that was going to happen. They've edited the article already. Hold on. See, this is where we get into two different computers. I took a screenshot over it on my other computer. It's not worth the time. Whatever. God, it kills me how obvious this all is. Just these constant effort to manipulate what you're looking at. Now, I don't even exactly remember what the other point was. One of them was this, about the idea that they're saying, well, there was other ones there, but they made a very clear point about this down here about people who just were outraged about the fact that he was even there. They said this is a Jewish cemetery, and they now just removed that. Of course they did. Yep. Well, here's one part of it. There was a part at the bottom, but it says, this is especially important. It says the ministry added, citing the IDF chief, he states that the holiness of the Jewish cemetery was harmed by the cross. So explain to me how you can argue that this is a cemetery, that no religious symbols are allowed, but then, and so implying that it's not the case, but then have somebody else go, but the cross harms it, and it's a Jewish cemetery. My point is not to even argue that's a problem. You can do whatever you want. It's your cemetery. My point is that why do you lie about it? And on top of that, a person that's willing to die for your agenda, and then you won't even allow them to represent that. Like, this is a lie about what Zionism is doing. They perceive, as they've stated publicly, that everybody else is lesser than. That's why it's an apartheid state. That's why human rights groups have called it what it is. B'Tselem itself calls it Jewish supremacy. That's an Israeli human rights group. So I just find this so incredibly insulting, and it should be to anybody who recognizes these people don't care about anything they're leaning into to get you to support their genocide. And that is not an attack on Jewish people or even Israelis. It's an attack on Zionism. Now, talking about northern Gaza, which is very important here because it is one. It's on top of everything else that's been happening over the year. Imagine this. We're literally, not imagine, we're talking about a location that has been genocide. They are genociding this location. Mass murder, ethnic cleansing. It's already happened. They drove everybody to the south, and some of them seem to, there is an element of people that weren't able to or chose to just stand their ground. And now they're just doubling down on genocide. And what they're doing here is so over the top, literally over the top from a year of genocide, which I don't even imagine something like that. So Netanyahu now, on the 22nd, declines Blinken's request to publicly say he's not doing this. So this is my point. That's why one of the reasons I segued from that point right there is here they are now saying in their press release that the stupid Matt Millers of the world will blindly repeat and act like it makes sense, that they are not doing the thing we can all see them doing, right? We can literally see them doing it. I'll show you all the videos next. But they come out with a statement. They go, no, that's not true. We're not doing that thing you can see us doing. And they all repeat it. And yet the problem is Blinken tried to give them an opportunity to say that. Well, just come up and say it. Say it publicly so people know. And they refused. They flatly declined to say they weren't doing what they're doing in God. It's about the general's plan, which here's the actual article for it that Robert wrote. Israel's, and this is what I've talked about as well on a previous show, their surrender or starve plan. That's what they called it. And it's called the general's plan for the main name. And it's not a secret. That's an open conversation. They're arguing it just they haven't done that. It's not happening. But it is though. And everyone knows that. And that's the point in the article. They've admitted that to their own Israeli media. And this is the point that I've always made over the years because they want their people to see it because they think it's two things. They want them to know that they want to think they're winning. And they want them to know that they can do this over the U.S. government. We're more powerful. That's how small and petty they are. They never earned this power, right? So so they come to the U.S. and go, we're not doing that. But then go to their media and go, we're doing that, and they know you can see that. And the Israeli government almost gets a kick out of being able to play that game. At least that's my perception of it. But they're starving people. They're literally starving children. And now, the point is, if you're going to pretend like they never did at the beginning. Let's just even say for sake of conversation, they weren't doing that, which was, we'll starve you to death if you don't do what we want, which, by the way, that's a crime. There's no way around it. That's why they're denying this now. Everything's been a crime. This is just not more of an obvious crime. My point is, if you think they were never doing it, you at least have to acknowledge that they're now proposing doing that. So it's not outside the realm of possibility they could have done it, which that's only for those people that are barely hanging on. The rest of you already know this is happening. But it says the prime minister, Netanyahu, and his aides rejected the request from Blinken. You know how embarrassing it must be to be Anthony Blinken right now? This pushover guy who just gets lied to and comes out and knows he's lying and knows that he's lying, and he just gets pushed back and forth between all these liars. What a walking using. This guy is a pushover. That's my point. You are going to be the one thrown under the bus. He must even feel that right now. But it says to publicly say that Israel's not implementing an ethnic cleansing plan, known as the general's plan. The report said Netanyahu and his top aides say that the general's plan was absolutely not our policy. Deeply damaging to us. A lie, basically. But the Times of Israel reported that Netanyahu rejected the request to publicly denounce the plan, which is funny. While Israeli officials have told the U.S. they're not carrying out the plan, Israeli soldiers have spoken directly to Haaretz last week that they already are underway in northern Gaza with this plan. It's incredible. Why not? Why not just lie? They know they're going to at least get the U.S. government to pretend it's not happening. So why not? That's what it looks like to normalize genocide, to give them the out. Now, John Cusack points this out as of the 21st. Many of these videos going around showing you the exact plan that we're talking about. Mohammed Shihada says Israeli public media is posting the Jabalia Death March as the ultimate victory picture of the Israeli genocide. They're praising this stuff. These are all civilians, women, children, elderly, children, men, and women caged up in concentration camps, starved and bombed, then rounded up and forced to move to the next concentration camp to be caged, starved, and bombed. This is from October. I mean, it's been going on for 76 years, but this has been going on nonstop since October 7th forward. And as John Cusack points out, the fact that this is not the number one story in the U.S. and it is and will be the greatest crime and shame of the U.S. You may not think that now because of your political agendas or your perception of how you should be lined up or what somebody told you on a Fox News show. But at the end of the day, history will not forget this, and we will go past this. And this will, I mean, even the politicians of tomorrow, just like they pretend they care about the assassination of Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King, or any number of other things that we know they were a part of, they will always pretend like they're how we need to rectify we need to, make amends or whatever else. The point is that this is a shameful thing that our government is proving to be a part of. And that we, as individuals, are the people that we've always talked about, as everyone's made this point 1,000 times. You know what you would have done in past examples. You're doing it right now. You will remember that going forward. You will look back on this with shame if you're a good person for choosing to hide from this. Because it is your tax dollars and it is happening in your name and your government is on the ground. So it is our responsibility, regardless of what the partisan screamers want you to think. Now, Pelham also points this out from the 17th. This is some of the stuff I had from back before, but I just want to make sure we saw it as well. This is this horrifying image I showed you, I think, on the last show. But just look at that scape. Look at that landscape. Just look at how far that goes. Just block after block after block of just all of it. Every single piece of these buildings has been bombed and shattered. Northern Gaza has been wiped off the earth. Over 500,000 civilians have seen no food enter since October 2nd until the 15th. And still to this moment, as I understand it, there's no food coming in. Funny how that was a huge deal they were denying until now they just blatantly do it. And no one cares. Same thing with the starvation, starve or kill. Like, it's everything we've been telling you they're doing. And now they're just doing it publicly. And now as they're publicly doing it, the people denying it won't even talk about it. As always. Charlie Hebert points out that the northern Gaza, as you can see here, Israeli forces rounding up every adult male conveniently beyond the scrutiny of the Western media, which is why they've been killing journalists and more than ever to stop people from seeing what they're doing, because they understandably don't want the world to see it. If you're still supporting this, you're on the wrong side. Committee to Protect Journalists on the 23rd, this is today, they write, the Committee to Protect Journalists is aware of accusations made by the Israeli Defense Forces against several journalists in Gaza, accusing them of being members of the militant groups. Israel has repeatedly made similar unproven claims without providing credible evidence. Now, even if you believe that's the case, even if it is the case, you have to understand the law requires that they prove that. Whether it's a building, a hospital, a human shield dynamic, they're supposed to prove this. They claim they do, but then every time they turn, I guess he wasn't there. Well, you just admitted to a war crime. See, this is the things that the world generally are aware of, that the ICCJ, the ICC, the UN, I mean, whatever you think about the bodies, I probably share your opinion. The point is that for whatever reason, they're calling it out. And we can prove, as Scott Ritter pointed out, when you see those controlled demolition of the buildings, it proves every time that they went in, proved that there was no threat, then left, then blew it up. All of these are being documented by the people that have no ability to stop this in real time. And at some point, there will be at least the effort of accountability. But as we go forward, it's on us as the individuals to do what we can to force our childish, blind, cowardly governments force them to stop this. Because that's the only thing it does, putting their own interests on the line. Now it says, after killing Al Jazeera's correspondent, Ismail Al-Ghul in July, the IDF previously produced a similar document, which contained contradictory information showing that he was born in 1997 and received apparently a Hamas military ranking in 2007 when he would have been 10 years old. Now, we're not talking about working with them. We're talking about being given a ranked position. That's not the reality, guys. They lied and they don't care. That's how clumsy this is. And everyone can see it, but the people that have the ability to do something to make them stop don't care, which means they're part of it. So that's always that uncomfortable realization that we can see from, the UK government, the US government, all the people that have been guiding you as the leaders of the world are the worst people in this conversation. The worst. The very people that are aware of how many lives are being stolen, and they just don't care for whatever reason. It could be that they're compromised financially, blackmail, who knows? But what it shows you is that they are in that position. There's no forgetting that. They're allowing this to continue. And guess what the Zionism Observer found? The same thing they keep trying to do, but getting caught lying about. And that's always how this goes. Every accusation is an admission. They've uncovered documents that reveal the journalist Nitzan Shapira is actually a militant, despite being employed as a journalist by Channel 12. There we go. Constantly happening. Now, Mohammed Shihada points out Israel's now openly declaring its intention to murder Gaza's remaining top journalists to ensure informational blackout. The journalists in question have been receiving repeated threats from the IDF to abandon their work or else. And you realize they're showing this stuff, guys. They're being openly threatened. Get out of here. We're going to kill you. It's amazing how much evidence there is behind all this. And here it is. The IDF are calling these out, and they're simply calling them terrorists. But they're terrorists, right? But they're sending them text message going, get out of here. We're going to kill you. Why don't you just kill them then? Aren't they terrorists? I mean, you have to obviously see how clumsy all of this is. They just want nobody to be able to report on what's coming and what's happening. Another local journalist on the ground says, and this is from the 17th Forward in Jabalia. The situation in Jabalia refugee camp is nothing short of a catastrophe. Hundreds of innocent Palestinians, many of them children, have lost their lives in relentless Israeli strikes, with many burned alive. Entire families have been wiped out in what seems to be a calculated effort to devastate northern Gaza. Civilians caught under rubble and with no safe haven are enduring unimaginable suffering. The world cannot remain silent in the face of this ongoing horror. Jabalia is in flames, and its people are pleading for justice. Don't forget, that's where the CIA was working with the Israeli government to conduct these raids. Now that it's burned, now everyone's burned and killed and well, gee, how else do we understand this? The CIA was committing crimes, at least was allowing them to be committed. Big surprise. And the same journalist covering this on the 19th. The first images of the horrific massacre against civilians. Now, this is after the math, right? They're trying to clean out the rubble, finding dead bodies, surviving people. Israeli occupation aircraft completely destroyed a residential block using fire belts, targeting the homes of Al-Sharif, Hindi, Al-Kakut, Driwi, and Obid families. The airstrike resulted in the total destruction of homes. Over 73 people killed, 100 injured, and several others are missing under the rubble. Civilians, civilian homes. Eva Bartlett, and I showed you this one briefly the other day. This is unbelievable to me. She says, after genociding all of Gaza over a year, Israel is very quickly genociding Gaza's north with the complicity of the U.S. government, which armed it and all the governments which enabled it. The simple point here, as they always do, as she points out they do in Syria, they bomb a location, and they kill, or rather they snipe a child. That's who it is, a child. And everyone runs. They get close enough, they bomb them. That's not by accident. That's by design. Let me ask you a question, guys. Can you hear that? Can you hear this video? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear this video. That would be great if you could. That would be the best way to do this. So I don't have to download the videos. The point is, this is just like with Yemen or anywhere else. This is by design. It's one of the most egregious types of war crimes, right? Killing somebody and then waiting for the ambulances to come in, bombing the ambulances. That is what the CIA with Saudi Arabia, and this is what they did. This is what they did. Or not necessarily just the U.S. government, let's say. In this case, it's obvious, and we know they're there. And they're murdering innocent people, children included, for hatred. Oh, you said hear it low? Okay, it's okay. You're just getting it through my microphone. I know some people can just play these live and it works for them. I'm not sure how to do that on StreamYard, but in any case, now this one that I showed you again is from the 17th, I believe. That's every day, guys. Israeli strike on a Gaza school kills 28, 5 children. 5 children. This every day this happens. They're not tied to some person's leg. There's not even an argument. This is some human shield. They just don't care anymore. Your government knows that and is desperate to keep this going. Mariam Barghouti says North Gaza is facing the harshest conditions since the start of Israel's genocidal campaign. It killed 450 people just in the last 2 weeks in Gaza alone. Our Palestinians are intentionally starved, especially in the last weeks where no aid has been allowed at all. Breastfeeding mothers, wounded people, starving children are being bombed and riddled with bullets while enduring Israel's savagery with no shelters, no hospitals, no water, barely a glimpse of electricity. That's assuming that they're not going to get stopped and raped and tortured by people that might catch them, which is obviously happening. And I already showed you this the other day. Oxfam is reporting water engineers, 4 of them were killed by Israeli military. Now, what's crazy about this kind of story, remember in the beginning when the first UN, whether UNRWA or anybody else was killed, it was a huge story. I was covering that like almost blown away that it wasn't getting more coverage. Remember that? I was counting the UN people killed until finally they just were like, oh, by the way, UNRWA's Hamas. And all of the blind, cowardly corporate media went the other direction. Well, here's Oxfam. They're not UNRWA. Just like Doctors Without Borders. I mean, they're just straight up murdering these people. Where's the conversation? Where's Matt Miller? Where's Biden? Where's Trump? Wouldn't they be screaming about this? Hey, they killed America. They killed their aid workers. Nope, nobody cares. They're not even trying to give you a narrative for why this makes sense. They just ignore it. That has to be some of the most powerful points. Now, as well as the fact that, as we just showed you the other day, Haaretz recently wrote the article telling you that Netanyahu's own party, the Likud party, sent out invitations for an event titled Preparing to Settle Gaza. Surprise, surprise. It's already been there. If you didn't already know that, then you got to think about who you're listening to. This has been publicly, they've been having conferences. Ben-Gvir's been dancing with the settlers. We're going to take Gaza. They've already built things in the earliest parts of Gaza. It's already been happening, and your government is pretending it's not there, or rather that you're racist for saying it's possible. And Arnaud Bertrand makes the excellent point to show you how dishonest it all is. Netanyahu, in July, said Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza. He went to the UN last month and he said again, we don't seek to resettle Gaza. Yet now his own party puts out the invitation to literally prepare to settle Gaza. You don't think he knows that? This guy is a disgusting liar. He's standing there almost getting off on the fact that he's able to lie and that this government, who knows he's lying, will parrot it anyway. Think about the power that he must feel, even though it's not real. Now, here's Ben-Gvir. Michael Peled, who you should follow, by the way, anti-Zionist Israeli, author of The General's Son. He says, violence is escalating against the Palestinians at a dangerous rate, and the world is doing nothing. The lies that Netanyahu spreads unchecked on platforms like Jordan Peterson enables this violence. We must call these people out and organize to take action to protect Palestinians.
Jordan Peterson, Netanyahu lays out the groundwork that justifies everything that comes next. Basically says this: the Arabs came to the land of Israel in the 7th century, forced all the Jews into exile, and colonized Israel. Then they left it barren. Then they decided to come back, and the Jews who had just come to the land of Israel and made it flourish welcomed the Arabs back. And then 1948 comes along, and the Arab countries attack us. They tell the Arabs in the land of Israel to leave, and then they blame us for the refugee problem. Again, the world according to Benjamin Netanyahu, which has nothing to do with reality. It was a country that was flourishing. Cities and villages, agriculture, industry, a political life, a judiciary, an academic life, hospitals, schools. Now, as Netanyahu is spewing this nonsense, the most radical elements of the Zionist world, their people on the ground are marching through Palestinian towns and neighborhoods, from Sheikh Jarrah to Al Khalil to Hebron to all over the place, shouting, another Nakba is coming. So was there a Nakba or wasn't there a Nakba? Now, the man responsible here is Benjamin Netanyahu. Under his watch, Palestinians are suffering every single day. They're being killed. They're being arrested. They're being tortured. Their homes are being destroyed. Their lands are being taken. Their water is being denied to them. Their kids are being tortured and killed. Every single day under his watch, Palestinians are being irritated in all of these issues at the same time. The refugees, the prisoners, Jerusalem, Ramadan, Al-Aqsa. What do you think is going to happen? What can anybody expect to happen? Especially when the man holding the keys to all of this is the madman, the lunatic, the racist thug, Itamar Ben-Gvir. The future couldn't be more dangerous. People need to stand up. People need to organize. Make sure that your elected officials or unelected officials understand that it's time to act. Challenge people like Peterson, who interview Netanyahu and don't challenge him. People like Joel Osteen, people like Bill Maher. Shame on them for giving this platform to a criminal, a war criminal, a vicious liar. Get informed, get other people informed, get other people angry, get other people ready to act. This cannot continue. We cannot pretend like nothing is going on.
Well, he's absolutely right. Oops. It's very obvious that people, I mean, whatever it is that's swaying him, it's obvious that this is what allows this to continue. Now, here's another clip. It's in Hebrew, but Mint Press News points out exactly what we're coming off of. This is Ben Gvir, the one he mentioned at the end. We are giving you the option to go from here to other countries. Right, just like they pretended before. And like they have, and even though you can look in their own documentation where it's very clear this is about expelling them with violence, the narrative changed. Now we pretend like we're going to let you go. This is their territory, according to everybody but the Israeli government of the U.S. And you don't allow, they're not going to go anywhere. So what this is setting up the narrative that when they do, it's their choice, even though you're going to force it to happen. Or if they don't, then they must be terrorists. These people are absolutely genocidal maniacs. A term that gets thrown around almost casually. If you've ever wanted to understand what a real genocidal maniac looks like, it's right there. These people are lunatics. And understandably, I think that even, or rather, as I understand it, according to Israeli media, the argument is that even Benjamin Netanyahu is terrified of these people, that he used them to maintain power and stay out of prison. And now they've essentially been able to take control in a large way using these settlers. I mean, these people are extremists of extremists. And Hind Kudari says, as they're doing to them, you either leave or you die. And that's what we're looking at. Look at their world behind them. Pinpoint targeted precision, right? Must have been pinpoint targeting the tunnels in the top floor of that building, right? It's just such willful ignorance. This is, and we'll end with a tweet from Torah Judaism, showing you the overlap to what happened during World War II. And if you want to compare these images, this is what you will always be shown. And of course, all the people that were taking a part of it, hopefully not, hopefully they're held accountable, but the way the world tends to go in the past, all the ones that were letting this happen will be the ones crying crocodile tears about how we can't let it happen again, while they're the ones literally making sure they can do it again. And here's Robert's article about this as it's continuing in northern Gaza. This is what's happening to people. Here's B'Tselem. The world must stop the ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza. The magnitude of the crimes Israel is currently committing in the northern Gaza Strip. Now, this is just in what's recently happening in the Gaza Strip, in the northern. It is in its campaign to empty it of however many residents are left is impossible to describe. Not just because hundreds of thousands of people enduring starvation, disease, without access to medical care, and incessant bombardments and gunfire defies comprehension, but because Israel has cut them off from the world. Ever since Israel's current operation in northern Gaza Strip began on October 5th, right? The one they pretend they're not doing now because the corporate media and the U.S. government are so cowardly that they'll blindly lie for them. But this is the general's plan since October 5th that B'Tselem is very aware of. Since that point, the area has been under a near complete siege, relentlessly pummeled by the military. Other than in the most exceptional cases, Israel does not allow humanitarian aid or emergency crews in, taking advantage of the fact that global attention has been diverted to irreversibly change reality on the ground. According to reports from humanitarian agencies, about 50,000 people have already been forced out of their homes since the offensive began. Now, that's not post-October 7th. That's post the beginning of the general's plan. The 3 hospitals that still operate in northern Gaza, and realize even then, that's only because they've been mended and refixed. They bombed all of them. It says that they're on the brink of collapse yet again, and themselves vulnerable to attack. The same goes for public buildings used as IDP camps, where many people who had sought refuge were killed in Israeli bombardments of refugee locations with no justification for the bombing because no one's paying attention. The few testimonies that have trickled out from northern Gaza describe dead bodies lining the streets, hunger, drinking water, nowhere to be found, and civilians being killed as bombs are dropped on their homes without warning or as they flee for their lives. Not even the feigned effort of dropping leaflets anymore and then bombing everywhere anyway. For a year now, it says, since the war began, the international community has shown utter impotence to stop indiscriminate attacks on civilians in the Gaza Strip. Strip. Now, I wouldn't say impotence. That almost implies they're unable. A willful desire. They choose to not act. They could act. Maybe to their own detriment, but they could. They're choosing not to. Now it says, when it is clearer than ever that Israel intends to forcibly displace northern Gaza's residents by committing some of the gravest crimes under the laws of war, the world's nations must take action. Without immediate, decisive action from the international community, without using every tool available, political, legal, economic, the mass killings of the northern Gaza Strip will continue, and the suffering of its besieged civilians will grow. All international bodies and institutions must act now to compel Israel to stop the war and end the carnage. This is the Israeli leading human rights group. You'd think that would matter to the U.S. government, whether Trump or Biden or the talking heads like the Millers of the world. How does it not? Because they know it and they don't care, guys. This is not some confusion. They're not misunderstood. They're willfully taking part in genocide and willfully covering it up. In case you need to be reminded. Oh, of course, that's the one that doesn't pop up. Hold on, let me bring this on my other computer real quick. Pull this over, 1 second. Miracles of technology, huh? Just as scary as it is interesting. All right, here we go. This is the B'Tselem post from 2021. The regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid. That's from the Israeli human rights group, one of the leading in the world. Here they are telling you what they're doing right now in northern Gaza is the worst thing I've seen yet. And it's from 2021. It's been since as far back as you can look. They're publicly telling you not only Jewish supremacy, and again, there's plenty of Jews in this location that don't agree with that. So it's a Zionism influence on that perspective, but that it's apartheid, the worst kind of racism. All of this is easy to see. Oh my gosh, I just realized something. Damn it. Well, heads up for those watching. I don't think I'm going to have my links. I'll try to fix that afterward, but I forgot. I've been closing them, and I don't think I have them saved because I did it on the other computer. There you go. Another hitch in the game today, but we'll get it all sorted out. So I won't close anymore because I guess I'll have to at least give these ones. But so to finish up here in general, after recognizing what's really going on, don't forget this as well. Forensic architecture. A year ago today, doctors stood among the bodies of victims at the Al-Ali blast. Remember the one they tried to pretend was somebody else, warning that if Israeli impunity continued, more attacks on Gaza's hospitals would follow, which they were right. Among them was surgeon Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita, a first-hand witness to the blast, which everyone ignored, whose testimony was overlooked. They've recovered it here. And here's the actual article, which again, it's from Forensic Architecture has done a great job on this so far, from the beginning of this, showing you with evidence, forensic evidence, what's actually going on. Now here, and you can watch this if you'd like. You've seen it before. It's him speaking about, or we've talked about this point before. His new video of him discussing how he knows this was a crime. But we also have a new video, and I'll show you some more of them from a doctor speaking out. And I mean, I'll include the thread that I've been trying to share as much as possible. I've added a whole bunch more doctors to it. Just how many doctors are speaking up, telling you that they're watching children get killed, they're watching assassinations, they're watching torture. Here's another doctor telling you what's going on.
Most people died. I mean, some days the most you could do is just hold people's hand and look them in the eyes. You watch them die, either because they were malnourished, they were starving, or we had no blood to give them. Every day it felt like that. Every day in the north felt like that. And the directors there only got a chance to breathe once a shipment of fuel and medicine and food came in, and that was always a Hail Mary. That was always felt like it was last minute. And now that it's really cut off, and they're not getting supplies in, they're not getting fuel in, they're not getting medicines in, they're not getting food in. Now they're really desperate, because before people would arrive last minute, they would arrive before the point of no return, and now that seems to be happening.
And can you talk specifically about the children in these hospitals? The number of children who are died, who are maimed, who've had amputations, well over 1,000 now are alive but amputated. The situation there, and this latest situation where one of the hospitals was the site of what was supposed to be a vaccination program today.
Yeah, I mean, you leave all of them behind. That's the hard part. You hate to see anyone suffer or die, but when you're just seeing innocent kids, it's not just the physical wounds too. I remember one little girl, she was caught in an airstrike and she was buried alive for 12 hours next to her dead parents. And then she got dug out and we had to perform emergency surgery on her leg. There's another little girl, 5 years old. She came in with both legs just mangled after an explosion, and the mom was just begging us not to amputate her legs. And we both knew her legs weren't going to make it. But I mean, those are the conversations we have to have. And I remember another 7-year-old girl came in with her arm just missing. Her arm was it was blown off. And the surgeon across from me, just a very stoic, unemotional, strong, resilient surgeon, just broke down in tears. He had it after 6 months, just couldn't take it anymore. So that toll is very exacting. I mean, the physical wounds you can get to heal. You can get an amputation wound to heal, but it's the psychic scars of seeing your parents buried alive, or you're buried alive and they're dead, and you're looking at them. Everyone in Gaza, every bed you go to has a horrifying story of loss, of losing a home, losing a loved one, losing a limb, losing an eye, and it never ends. And it just, every day you wake up to more and more of it, and that's just what makes it so horrifying.
So I can't hear it, unfortunately. I could comment generally, but usually I comment on specifics that he might have said. But overall, the point, and I have listened to it earlier, the overall point is just how constant this is, how constant. All of these different doctors telling you all of the same things, and it just doesn't change the conversation. Or New York Times can write an article about all the 65 doctors that signed the same thing, and it all just keeps continuing forward. That's the hardest part for people like us to continue, who see it. It's all right there. Here's another point. Huge deal. The doctor who provided the New York Times the photos of children shot through the head went with Palestinian PAMA, who posted to Facebook this week that their doctors were quoted in the article. Israel has now banned them and others from Gaza. Simple as that, right? So you prove that they did something wrong, now you get banned, right? We've already shown you this example of the State Department person who says that the moment they found out they were raping children, what'd they do? Well, they shut the awareness down. They didn't stop the raping, though.
We have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen.
The problem here, on top of the obvious, if you look at the conversation beneath these videos when that was first posted, half of them are calling that guy a racist. Simply showing you how dumb this is, how lowest of the bottom of the barrel, lowest common denominator. You're talking about children being raped and the cover of that up, and your only issue is that he must hate Jews then, right? Like that's desperation, guys. Desperation. And that's why this has become so obvious. The dishonesty is everywhere. Now, to the end point here about aid, right? Because the whole reality here is that on top of we know because of the new plan that they've openly stated that they're surrender or starve. And now we can prove on top of that, not a single piece of aid has come in since October 2nd. So everything, by the way, that's already mostly been happening from the very beginning, but now it's explicit. And yet, where's the speaking now? Everyone was denying it back then. Now that you can all prove it, and the same people denying it haven't said a word. Where's Matt Miller? Because here he is right here telling you that it's okay, that we're going to do it anyway. So all this time, the point was it's not happening. That's why we don't have to stop aid. But now that we know it is, we're going to go ahead and give them that, which, by the way, there you go. Like every other stage, they're now just telling you what we've always been telling you. That's why, because they don't care. Now that they're forced to acknowledge, now they just have to go, well, too bad. We don't care. Move on. That's where we are. They are going to continue to fund these people because that's the plan. They don't care if they break the law because they're all breaking the law. Here is Asal Rod pointing out that they are going to continue to fund them, to arm them, regardless of their violations.
Thank you, Matt. Our colleagues at Politico reported that a U.S. envoy told aid groups that the U.S. would not consider withholding weapons to Israel for blocking food and medicine, that essentially the rules don't apply to Israel. Given
it's not essential. No, forget what the essentially. That's not at all an accurate representation of her comments.
That's not all
of which were accurately presented in that article. I would say, should note as always with these, you have what becomes a secondhand presentation put into an article. Not all of those comments were in any way accurate.
Sure, but was the basic characterization of her describing U.S.
I'm not going to speak to a private meeting, but we have always made clear that we are committed to the defense of Israel. We will continue to support the defense of Israel, but we also are going to enforce U.S. law.
So you will enforce U.S. law, including
if you look at the letter that the secretary, sent the other day, he said that there are a number of U.S. laws and policies that are implemented by Israel not taking steps to allow humanitarian assistance to get in, and we will enforce U.S. law. But we're going we want to see Israel take increased steps. We've seen them take some increased steps over the last few days, but we need to see much more.
I guess there have been previous instances for which this threat has been sort of floated, whether it's in the wake of this 7 central kitchen workers that were killed, whether it was in before any sort of major operation in Rafah. Of course, the administration maintains that there wasn't a major operation, but nevertheless, there have been instances for which this threat has been offered, and yet there hasn't been any actualization of it.
So I know that your objective is to see the end of U.S. support to Israel. Our objective is to see Israel take steps to increase humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza. We have other steps as well, but that's relevant to the conversation we're having now. And so our engagement with them on this question has been to push them to take steps. And at times we've seen them take really important steps. When we had this last major engagement with them in April, we saw them take a number of steps to open new crossings, and it got trucks up to 300 to 400 in some days. Now we saw significant first stagnation and then backsliding over the last few months, which is why the secretary felt it was important to send that letter this Sunday.
To be clear,
Sean,
my
go
objective
ahead.
is not to. My objective is to ask about the U.S. enforcing
I understand,
its laws.
Sean.
It's not to do that.
Can we actually go to Western Sahara?
Sorry to make you listen to this clown, but the point is obvious, right? How he tries to frame Thacker as somehow the problem. No, he cares about you, the law. You see, it's funny how you project, you just have the agenda to frame it this way. No, it's what you guys are doing. Now, he may as well. But in that context, it's obvious to point out that he was simply acknowledging the fact that you are in, and the clear reality is that they're going to continue to do so. Now, here's another clip of Matt Miller before that, embarrassingly denying that it was happening, but at the same time admitting it was happening. That's how stupid this is. This one. Hold on.
It's pertinent that you have made an assessment, or the secretary made an assessment that Israel has not been blocking aid, and that was kind of based on the fact that they were making improvements. Since they've gone backward, would you revisit that assessment? It sounds like things have gone backward from that.
So what we said when the secretary made that assessment, and if you look at the language inside the National Security Memorandum report, it's quite clear that this would be an ongoing assessment and that we expect progress to continue, and that if we see a change in situation, it'll change our policy.
And at the moment, for the purposes of U.S. law, is Israel blocking the delivery of humanitarian aid?
We have not made that assessment at this time, but that goes to the point that it is urgent that they correct the situation and allow humanitarian aid to get in.
It's just so stupid. It really is just like the epitome of like, I think they know, he knows he's caught, right? You can't ask them to stop what they're doing to allow aid to get through if they're not blocking aid. I mean, it's just patently stupid. And again, Whether it's ProPublica or anybody else, I mean, it's obvious because we all seen it. We've seen the settlers blocking aid. We've seen them admitting blocking aid. We've seen them say no water, no food, no fuel. We've seen these things. And yet here we have to have ProPublica tell you there's 2 U.S. state government agencies that are admitting you're blocking aid. Blinken gets caught. He even gets reprimanded for it. And here's Miller saying we're not doing that. It's especially stupid. And it's incredible how dishonest these people are. Now, just in case you need more convincing, here's the Jerusalem Post. Israel stops processing key food imports to Gaza. But fake news, though, of course. Here is Haaretz from 22nd of October. Netanyahu isn't willing to hear about an end to the war, which, by the way, has been the case from the entire point, from the whole thing, as even Haaretz has covered from months ago, how he has systematically thwarted these talks. They've covered it countless times, and your government just loves to lie to you about it. Sources well-versed in the negotiations say the state of the talks hasn't changed. He's not budging on the deal, which means he's allowing his own people to continue to die while they bomb them, while they starve them. There's no way around that. And guess what? Almost all of their conversation in Israel is very aware of that. They are screaming mad about them stopping what they're doing, but not because they care about Palestinians, because they want their families back, like anybody would. My point is that everybody wants that to stop. They should just keep going. It's not about anybody. It's about their agenda, and everyone's beginning to realize that, and they're killing everyone to get there. Here again is just the United Nations pointing out as of October 16th, the shocking decline, which, by the way, again, has never once crossed over 200 and, I mean, even that says 165. So we're talking about how many a day? 500 a day before 2023 was the norm, and that was barely hanging on. That was including fuel. They've never once apparently even gone over 165. Look, and these are, how do I forget how to zoom in all of a sudden? Oh, that's a new computer. That's right. So as you can see here, zoom in for yourselves. I'll figure that out later. 0 since October 2nd. The point is that they've never gone over it. This is the systematic design to starve. As everyone's been telling you, as the IPC and everybody else at a point, this is a mass famine. They know that. They're all lying about it. And you even have whatever, there's not a word bad enough for people like Elon Levy, who are out there tap dancing around, acting like everything's fantastic and calling, they got more food than ever. There's a special place in hell for people like that, who are just the mouthpieces of, they're not even getting, but they're just the mouthpieces of genocide. They just like to be close to power, even when they're murdering children. I hope they're held accountable. The point is they're denying a famine in real time. Kate Brown points out Israel, because they're totally not stopping everything, has now barred 6 international medical charities from entering Gaza, according to the WHO. The denial follows Senator Blinken warning the U.S. could suspend aid. We could suspend aid if you keep doing what we've been doing for a year. Because nobody believes you, Blinken, because you're a feckless liar who's been caught over and over. And in this case, you're demonstrating that you're going to wait 30 days to do something as they've been breaking it for a year straight. You're not going to stop. It's all a fraud. It's a facade. U.S. warns they better boost aid, even though they're not stopping it, though. We just want you to increase the aid, even though you're giving them more than they need, right? Like we can't piece that together or risk losing weapons funding. Like, it's a lie, guys. They've already been caught lying about this from the beginning. You know what the difference with Trump would be? They wouldn't even pretend to stop it. They would just ignore it. Here it is. Breaking, they say 30 days. You better stop genocide by 30 days or we'll pretend something else changed. We won't stop. The point is they're going to pretend, they're going to say we'll stop it, the genocide won't stop, and they're going to pretend a new narrative started. Or another event will happen and we'll stop talking about it. It's a game of human life that they don't care about. And guess what? They've given $5.2 billion more dollars to the genocidal entity. That's real. That's happening right now. They're giving more billions upon billions of dollars. And maybe that's why. Give us 30 days to give you all the money you need. Then we'll pretend to stop. That's how criminal they are. Please do not miss that fact. Now, lastly, on the Lebanon point, it's just embarrassing how obvious this stuff is. Now, this guy is one of these, I've only just recently seen him pop onto this, but he seems to be this prolific Zionist manipulator. It goes, amazing. The IDF releases a video, like the thousands of other videos. Weird, this looks just like the Shifa dynamic that never turned out to be real. How funny how they just reproduce them because they're lazy. It tells the Lebanese people exactly how to locate the gold, apparently, the money that's buried in a certain location. So get this. Not only do they lie about how there's money in gold stores they've stolen from them that turns out to be fake, I'll show you next, but they dump this into the population and go, Lebanese people, here it is, go get it. because that's about helping people. You want them to start, what they want is chaos. They want these people to start breaking down doors and invading government buildings so they can turn around and call them crazy and use it to justify their action. They don't care about anybody. They will hurt their own people. They'll kill any civilian. It's how we don't know that by now. If you don't, it blows my mind. They've been publicly executing civilians from day one. Now they're trying to turn them against each other. That's how this works. It's like sanctions from the U.S. and starving Iranians. They blame it on them, even though you're going, yay, look, they have to sell their organs. That's how this works. And then blame it on Iran. It's not working anymore. People see through them. The point, though, is I won't play them just for, I'm feeling like wrapping up right now, but here's Steve Sweeney. Well, I guess I'll play this one. I think it's pretty short. Yeah, 50 seconds. Here's the one that Steve played on AM Wake Up. This is the BBC. Literally walking through in every aspect of the building and saying, yeah, that's not here. Now, yes, they could have missed it. They could be lying. The point, though, is that this is my point about Lebanon. This is not Gaza. There's people there can investigate. You can go and look and prove there's no tunnel under that house. And they're still doing it anyway. And in real time, getting exposed for lying. I mean, guess what's happening in Gaza anyway. The point, though, is that now it's such a real-time example, and it's something that they can't hide from. They can't just go, they could bomb again, but they're getting exposed in real time. Now, what you're seeing, right, you have the BBC example, but this is them, groupings of people walking through there. Now, of course, you could also say they moved it, but it's be kind of hard to move a lot of gold like that in a rapid succession. But my point is that ultimately they just float these narratives with nothing to back it up. And before this, there was nothing like this to happen. They would just demolish the entire building and say, we did it. And your governments didn't care. Now it's a different dynamic. But is anything going to happen? Probably not.
Well, we're on level -2 in the Al Sahel hospital. The area just behind me is where medical waste is stored. Even that was opened up for us to have a look. The morgue was opened up. All of the drawers were opened to show us there was nothing inside. Doctors have been opening piles of surgical scrubs, boxes of equipment, very, very keen to show us everything there is to see and to prove that there is nothing here. Well, I'm just coming now from the basement on -2 up to -1. We've been brought around the hospital.
Now, here is Lebanon yesterday. It's a picture I used for today. So the bottom line is obviously we have even corporate media going through, independent journalists. I mean, the reality is they tried to float a narrative to kill, and guess, they'll probably still try to use the narrative. Again, why wouldn't they if they know the power structures they need to rely on to make this happen don't care? Probably bomb their own people on top of that. I mean, we've already seen them kill Americans and your government doesn't care. Seen them arrest American journalists. Your government doesn't care. Where's all the American first people out there? You don't think Trump would be different? The same thing happened with him and other dynamics. The point is they're bombing these locations, civilian locations in rapid succession, and people are just ignoring it. Steve Sweeney again points out this as of today. This is right before I went live. Beirut is under attack once more with heavy bombing in the southern suburbs. The offices of Al Mayadeen have been struck, a journalist outlet, despite what you think about it, and an area close to the Iranian embassy. I mean, they're just pulling out all the stops, guys. They have also been bombed for the second time since Monday, these different families, when at least 18 people were killed after a missile destroyed an apartment block, pretty much wiping out 2 families. The reason for the attacks on these areas are in part an attack on the Amal movement. It is the same reason for the pressure so the hospital whose director is an Amal MP, part of their governmental process, coming after parliamentary speaker Berry, also from Amal, rejected the U.S.-Israel surrender deal. So the point is they rejected a certain deal they wanted. The bottom line is they'll do whatever they want. That's the real point. They'll kill who they want. They'll bomb government buildings, which they've been doing from the beginning. They'll kill journalists, bomb hospitals, schools, children. And it seems like there is no red line for Israel. The big surprise, you probably recognized this months ago. Dan Cohen says Israeli Air Force Brigadier General Amichai Levine says war planes dropped about 100 bombs on the Beirut residential complex that killed Nasrallah. That's actually even more than the figure of 83 bombs that was reported. So of course, they could be blustering, which means they want it to sound worse than it is, which shows you how genocidal they are. But his point is it wasn't a precision strike, which, my God, we should already know by now. It was a mass destruction attack on a location that I still argue they weren't even sure he was there. This is genocide in every possible way. Oops. Now, I'm actually going to go into this more in another discussion about Iran, but I'll end with the point that now here's Netanyahu and Blinken, after everything we just discussed, discussing how they're going to unite against Iran. You know, the same Iran that we've been pointing out was always a central part of this that have nothing to do with what's going on other than allied with the people that are suppressed. And all they want you to think is it's all evil, bad guy Iran because that's been Israel's agenda for decades. And your government is willing to allow genocide, play out genocide, be a part of genocide to allow that to continue. There is no evidence that backs up what they're trying to call out here. The real obvious state sponsors of terrorism are, you know, the ones sponsoring terrorism that we can prove everywhere. Israel, the United States in spades. But we'll always point somewhere else because, well, they want to go after Iran. So we'll make up a narrative. And the partisan screamers will go right along with it. I'm trying to reach the rest of you, you know, the actual majority. Time to stand up. Time to do something, time to care enough to stop being, you know, meekly following along with a power structure because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Find the courage. Torah Judaism, Gaza is today's Auschwitz. The irony of becoming what you once hated. Now, whatever you think about this, this is a Jewish organization that's making this allegation. Zionism is Nazism. Today's Zionists are today's Nazis, they write. The Zionist state of Israel is today's Nazi state. Israel, they write, is no different from the Nazi state. Once upon a time, the Nazis forced Jews from their houses, and now Israel's doing what the Nazis did and forcing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to leave their homes. All right, this is right now. This is exactly what, I mean, this is the comparison that should matter to you. Whatever you think about what actually happened, whatever you think about any of the dynamics, the point is this is a Jewish organization, an Orthodox Jewish organization that is telling you they are the problem. Hopefully that reaches some people to understand that it's not about Jewish people. It's not about Israelis. It's about Zionism influencing all of those things. Now I'm going to make a point about Iran. There's a tweet about Trump that I was going to get into about what he said here, but we'll come back. I want to do a bigger point about that in general and talk more about the issue of the highlighting of Iran and how Trump's organization is clearly driving that forward. It's important to understand. They're making all sorts of allegations about people in the government because they're Iranian without any evidence, by the way. Just because we accuse them, because Israel said so. And now they're starting to have a witch hunt against American politicians because Israel says they do something. Like, how does this not become the obvious? This is reminiscent of so many other examples of history that we all look down on. Today, again, people are just so afraid to stand up for what they know is right in the midst of the political fervor. I get it. I deal with it every day. You have no idea the amount of attacks, the amount of threats, the amount of negative content that I get every day that I don't even care to talk about. Emails and texts and horrible things. Because that's what happens when you stand up against the power structure. But you know what? It's the right thing to do. And I know you know that. That's why you're here. That's why you care. You're looking for something else. You're looking for some information that this doesn't make sense over here. But don't stop here. Look everywhere else too. Stand back, put it all together, come to your own conclusions, because that's what we need more than anything today. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of, a growing group of people in the world that care more about human life and care more about what's right, care more about, your integrity and your principles than you do about some party line, about some color or some hat, that you care about what's right. And that may differ between people, but the point is you stand by your principles. Because you know that. I mean, it's a core value. It's what we talk about, being better, right? Just a little bit better every day, trying to strive to make yourself a better person or a stronger character or whatever else it is. The people out there who are acting in the petty, small ways and their self-interest, their immediate gratification, they're not waking up in the morning asking how they can be a better person that day, about how they can change somebody's life. They don't care about those things. They want you to think that, though. Hopefully you can see through it. Hopefully you can find that path. Because we need to today, more than ever. Thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.